Chapter 1292. Facing Jean Z's towering rage, the woman's arrogance immediately disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only fear. She looked at Jean Z, not knowing what was going on. She didn't even have the courage to open her mouth. "Speak!" Jean Z suddenly roared. The woman was so frightened that her hands went limp, unconsciously letting go of Mu Ling-er. Jean Z took the opportunity to pull Mu Ling-er over, holding her in his arms. He didn't need the woman's answer. Staring at her sinisterly and cold as he sentenced her to death, he said, "You're courting death." In a moment, the 10 big white tigers behind him rushed forward, surrounding the woman. The woman had never been afraid of beasts since she was young. Even if she couldn't control the tiger clan, she wasn't afraid of tigers. However, facing the 10 big tigers, she was so frightened that she fell on her butt on the ground, crying out, "Ah! Ah!" Tear her apart. With Jean Z's order, a big white tiger pounced over, pushing the woman to the ground, aiming to bite her neck. Just at this moment, the woman suddenly let out a strange cry, like a wolf's cry and a leopard's roar, clearly giving an order to the wolf pack and snow leopard. The wolf pack and snow leopard all crawled on the ground, not daring to move. On the contrary, the big white tiger was curious and didn't immediately bite, but turned to look at Jean Z. When Jean Z came and saw so many wild beasts, he already had his suspicions. This woman understood the beast language and controlled so many wild beasts on the snow mountain. She should be a remnant of the Black Clan. So what if the Black Clan still had remnants on the snow mountain? He would also kill this woman without a doubt. She actually dared to bully Mu Ling-er to this extent. How could he tolerate this? One must know that he had always bullied Mu Ling-er, but he had never bullied her to the point of crying. This woman, what right did she have? Seeing the big white tiger stop, Jean Z kicked the tiger's butt and roared angrily, scaring the big white tiger so much that it didn't dare to delay and immediately opened its mouth to bite down. Seeing that the fangs were about to bite the woman's neck, the woman suddenly shouted, "You must have been kidnapped. I know who you are. I know where you came from. I'm going to die. No one can tell you." As soon as he said this, Jean Z was stunned. Mu Ling-er, who was still crying, immediately rushed over and pushed the big white tiger's big mouth away. "No!" The woman spat out a mouthful of blood, her heart thumping wildly. She had truly escaped from the jaws of death. Mu Ling-er turned around and looked at Goldie. She saw a complicated look in Goldie's eyes, and he even seemed to be avoiding her gaze. She knew that Jean Z had been searching for his origins. When this woman appeared, she immediately thought of Jean Z's background. Mu Ling-er, who was kneeling at the side, also secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She had actually forgotten how badly she had been bullied just now. At this moment, all her thoughts were focused on Jean Z's background. What really surprised Jean Z was the word trafficking, right? These two words proved that this woman knew about him, and also proved that this woman was not a member of the Black Clan. Although his indenture contract was in Ning Cheng's hands, he had never been Ning Cheng's slave, but Ning Cheng's friend and partner. He had long been the owner of the three-way black market, and did not live the life of a slave. He had always wanted to take back his indenture contract and return to Wintercrow country. First, he wanted to be free and not be restricted by others. Second, he wanted to figure out his origins, find out who he was, and find his parents and family. When he found out that he was born with beast taming skills in Tiger's prison, and could control the Tiger Clan that the Black Clan could not, he knew that he was definitely from an ordinary family. Ning Cheng had once asked him about his childhood memories, but unfortunately, he could not remember any of them. Ning Cheng had said that with his talent, he must have been kidnapped to become a slave. The woman was about to get up, but Jean Z suddenly stepped on her neck, looking down at her from above. Coldly, he said, "No matter who you are, no matter what you know, apologize to Mu Ling-er first." God knew how strong Jean Z's foot was. The woman's face turned red, and she had difficulty breathing. She could not even open her mouth, and kept waving at Jean Z, wanting him to let go of her. Mu Ling-er looked at Jean Z's angry side profile. She wanted to speak, but did not dare to. She thought that the last time they parted was when he was at his angriest, but now he was 10 times fiercer than before. So fierce, she did not dare to speak. Once Jean Z let go of the woman's neck, the woman coughed violently. Jean Z did not care, and said coldly, "Apologize." The woman was full of unwillingness, and answered impatiently, "I know. At least let me stand up." Jean Z did not speak, and watched the woman get up. However, just as the woman steadied herself, he kicked the woman's knee, and she knelt down. He lowered his eyes, and his fringe covered the left corner of his eye. He said, "If you want to apologize, you have to look like you're apologizing." The woman had always been proud, and when had she ever suffered such a loss? She stubbornly stood up, raised her chin, and said disdainfully, "Touching a woman? What kind of man are you? Thank you for the reminder. Don't worry. This lord will not touch a single hair on your body." Jean Z sneered, and he snapped his fingers. A large tiger pounced over and pushed the woman down from behind, causing her to fall flat on her face beside Mu Ling-er's feet. The woman was furious. "You're going too far. This man actually humiliated her like this. Did he mean that she was only worthy of being touched by a beast? How hateful." Jean Z was really a block of ice when he was cold. He did not understand what going too far meant, but he knew that she had to pay the price for bullying Mu Ling-er. "Apologize," he said coldly. "Kill me if you have the ability." The woman was definitely afraid, so she hurriedly added a threat. "You'll never know who you are." The Black Forest was the home of all the beast tamer clans on the mysterious continent. There were more than 10 beast tamer clans in the Black Forest, and there were different levels of beast taming skills. Being able to speak the beast language was just one of the skills, and almost all beast tamer clans knew it. The master of the Black Forest was the head of the beast tamer clans, the Ling family. This was because the Ling family's beast taming skills were far superior to other clans. Even the beasts controlled by other clans could be snatched away by the Ling family. Most importantly, the Ling family could tame the king of beasts, the Tiger clan. Many years ago, the Ling family's young master, who was not even a year old, suddenly disappeared. The Ling family's matriarch lost her mind because of this, and the Ling family's patriarch no longer cared about the clan's affairs in the Black Forest. He lived in seclusion with his wife, and they never saw anyone again. With the Ling family out of the way, the Black Forest lost all sense of order. The various clans fought fiercely against each other, and wild beasts ran amok. The Black Forest was already one of the most dangerous places in the mysterious continent, but after that it became a place feared by many. Taming a single tiger was nothing, but taming a pack of them was something else. The woman was very likely that the man before her was a descendant of the Ling family. He had to be their long-lost young master. If he hadn't been killed in the past, then it was very likely that he'd been kidnapped and sold to Cloud Realm Continent. How could the two elders of the Ling family know that their son had been sent to Cloud Realm Continent? The woman knew that this was a secret, and it would be her greatest bargaining chip. "Are you threatening me?" Jean Z narrowed his eyes. "If you spare me, I'll take you back to your clan," the woman said seriously. Jean Z ignored her and made strange noises at the pack of wolves. Very soon, a wild wolf dashed over and stepped on the woman's back. Before the woman could understand what was going on, the wild wolf lowered its head and took a fierce bite, tearing off a large piece of meat from the woman's back. "Ah!" The woman cried out in pain, her shrill cries echoing through the snowy grounds. The wild wolf devoured the woman's flesh, leaving Mu Ling-er gaping at the sight. Her heart raced, but Jean Z's gaze was cold and unmoved. Just as the wolf stepped on the woman's back again, she finally relented. Or rather, she gave in completely. Ignoring the pain, she cried out, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's my fault. I'm sorry." Mu Ling-er gave a start and didn't say a word. "Whose medicine field is it?" Jean Z asked coldly. "It's hers. It's hers." The woman replied hastily. She didn't even wait for Jean Z to ask before she admitted it herself. "I'm a slut. I'm a slut." Mu Ling-er looked at the woman, then slowly glanced back at Jean Z, who was looking back at her. When their eyes met, Mu Ling-er subconsciously looked away. For some reason, she felt wronged and angry, but now, she suddenly wanted to laugh. It wasn't because she wanted to vent her anger. She couldn't explain why. In any case, she was no longer angry at the woman and didn't want to be calculative. Jean Z asked coldly, "What happened to the wound on your face?" Only then did Mu Ling remember the scratch marks on her face. It still hurt when she touched them lightly. She said, "This woman scratched me. Take her back." Jean Z's tone was practically an order. He wouldn't allow Mu Ling to suffer any losses. Mu Ling looked up and said, "Forget it. Let's—" "No." Jean Z interrupted her unhappily. Mu Ling said softly, "I'm fine. I won't be calculative with someone like her." Jean Z's face darkened as he said this. He hated this kind and magnanimous character the most. But unexpectedly, Mu Ling continued, "Ask her to apologize to Big White and ask Big White to catch her for me. I don't want to get physical with her." Hearing this, the woman was so angry that she forgot about the pain on her back. She was about to explode. She originally thought that Mu Ling would be more magnanimous. Who knew that Mu Ling would join Jean Z in humiliating her? They were clearly saying that she was only fit to be touched by beasts. Jean Z's frozen face finally cracked. He couldn't help but smile dotingly. Unfortunately, it disappeared quickly and Mu Ling didn't see it either. Coldly, he said, "All right." He looked at Big White. Seeing Big White covered in blood, how could he not feel pained? He waved his hand and Big White ran over. He hadn't even opened his mouth when Big White attacked first. He swatted at the woman with his large paw and threw her into the distance. Beasts didn't care about her apology. In the world of beasts, how could there be such a thing as an apology? Attacking was the most straightforward way. Jean Z and Mu Ling chased after her. Big White immediately followed after them. They saw the woman vomiting blood and fainting. Big White was about to attack again when Mu Ling hurriedly stopped him. "That's enough. If you kill her, your master won't know where she came from." Chapter 1293. Not to mention a heavily injured person, even a normal person would die if they were to lie in the snow for 2 hours. Mu Ling personally took action and dragged the woman into the stone house. Jean Z pulled her up and frowned as he looked at the wound on her face. "Go and apply medicine. Pull her back first, otherwise she will die." Mu Ling said seriously. "She deserves to die." Jean Z said, "You really don't want to know about your background?" Mu Ling asked angrily. She did not know what she was angry about. She could not even speak 3 sentences with this fellow and she would always get angry. "I don't need you to care about my matters. Go and apply medicine." Jean Z pulled her into the house, but Mu Ling fiercely flung his hand away. "I also don't need you to worry about my matters. You." Jean Z's anger was stuck in his chest and he felt extremely uncomfortable. He scolded loudly, "Mu Ling, how stupid are you? Did your parents give you a brain? Do you know how dangerous this place is? Who allowed you to come here?" It was fine if he scolded her, but he even dragged her parents into it? Mu Ling was also angry. "Jean Z, I will say it for the last time. I don't need you to worry about my matters. Don't you understand human language? You go now, immediately, quickly bring that woman into the house. If she dies, you won't even have time to cry. Whether she dies or not, what does it have to do with me?" Jean Z was mad with anger. He risked his life and cleaved a path through the thick snow. He risked his life and braved the wind and snow. His clothes were wet and dry several times, but he didn't dare to stop to change. He just wanted to find her as soon as possible. How could she not be grateful to him? Didn't she love to cry? After suffering such a big grievance, if she did not accept it, shouldn't she throw herself into his arms and cry? She actually dared to quarrel with him so confidently? What kind of woman was this? Mu Ling was also angry. How hard was it to communicate with Jean Z? How many times do you want me to say it before you understand? Do you really not understand human language? If she's dead, you won't be able to find out who you really are? Haven't you been investigating your background? Mu Ling asked angrily. "Why are you worried that I won't be able to find out my background?" Goldie asked angrily. That's what I'm worried about, Mu Ling said fiercely. As soon as he said that, the two of them suddenly quieted down. They looked at each other at the same time, but they immediately looked away. Soon, Mu Linger explained anxiously. I was worried that you wouldn't be able to find out the truth and would blame me for it. I don't want to be the scapegoat. Thank you for reminding me. After Jinzi finished speaking, he strode over and carried the unconscious woman in his arms. Mu Linger looked at it and slowly frowned. She didn't even notice it. Jinzi placed the woman on the only stone couch in the stone house. Mu Linger entered the house and asked, What about Big White's injury? Its blood is poisonous. If you touch it, it will heal on its own. Jinzi said coldly. Mu Linger returned and stood by the bed. Jinzi couldn't take it anymore. Aren't you going to apply the medicine? If your face is ruined, you can forget about getting married for the rest of your life. Mu Linger didn't answer him, but she still went to apply the medicine obediently. Fortunately, the scratch marks weren't too deep and could still heal. After applying the medicine, Mu Linger sat down at the side and said mildly, Why are you here? Why, you don't want me to come? Jinzi asked. Mu Linger was silent for a moment before saying softly, Thank you. If he hadn't come, she didn't know what would have happened. She didn't know if she would have survived. She didn't know if Jinzi would accept her gratitude. He was silent for a long time. The two of them just sat there, the woman still unconscious. When the sky was completely dark, Mu Linger stood up and said mildly, I'm going to cook. Mu Linger. Jinzi called out to her. Who do you want to come? It was so dangerous and she was bullied to tears. If she didn't want him to come, who did she want to come? Who do you want to come? Jinzi murmured. Mu Linger didn't turn around, but she stopped in her tracks. Who did she want to come? If Jinzi hadn't asked, she wouldn't have thought of this question. Yes, she was bullied to tears. Who did she want to come and save her? If it was in the past, the first person she thought of would be Chi brother. It must be. But this time her mind was empty. She didn't think of anyone. She didn't have any hope or expectation. Would it mean that one had grown up when they no longer wished, longed, or imagined the impossible? She knew very well that Chi brother wouldn't come. It was impossible. No one. Mu Linger was very honest. I just want my martial arts to be better. Mu Linger was about to leave when Jinzi asked, Mu Linger, can I ask you a question? Mu Linger didn't say anything and didn't walk forward. Jinzi walked towards her step by step and stood behind her. Mu Linger waited for a moment, but he didn't continue. She was about to ask when Jinzi suddenly hugged her from behind and pulled her into his arms tightly. He said, Mu Linger, since you don't have any hope in your heart, then this time I'm here. Can you want me to come next time? Jinzi clearly felt the person in his arms stiffen. He buried his head in her shoulder and closed his eyes, waiting for an answer, or rather, waiting for a trial. He knew that it was impossible, but he couldn't help but ask. He knew that he couldn't love her, but he couldn't help but say that he loved her. He knew that he could force her, but he couldn't bear to force her. He just wanted to ask. Mu Linger had already closed her eyes. She closed them the moment Jinzi hugged her. The corners of her eyes were filled with tears. She didn't know if it was from before or from now. She was afraid, but she didn't know what she was afraid of. She hadn't thought of Chi brother for a long time, but she suddenly thought of him at this time. She didn't know why she thought of him. In her world for more than 10 years, Chi brother was the only person she loved. No one else had ever loved her. In her world for more than 10 years, no one had ever loved her, including Chi brother. Was she afraid? Or was she not used to it? She couldn't figure out her own heart. She just realized that she didn't even understand herself. At this moment, she didn't even have the ability to think. She just wanted to run away and hide. Let go of me. Mu Linger choked. Jinzi instantly opened his eyes. You haven't answered my question. Mu Linger was about to answer, but Jinzi interrupted her. Think about it carefully before you give me an answer. I've waited for 2 years. I don't mind waiting for a few more years. He immediately let go of her after he finished speaking. Mu Linger rushed out and hid in a place where Jinzi couldn't see her. She cried loudly. She didn't even know why she was crying. She just wanted to cry. She was so upset that she wanted to cry. Why? Why was she so upset? When Mu Linger returned, Jean Z had already prepared a meal and was waiting for her. Her eyes were red from crying. She couldn't hide it no matter how hard she tried. But he acted as if nothing had happened. He sat at the table with his eyes downcast and his face cold. Mu Linger's attention was somewhat diverted when she saw the food on the table. The food was really delicious. It was a bowl of preserved meat rice. Although there were only mushrooms and preserved meat, the taste and appearance were mouth-watering. Eat it while it's hot, Jean Z said cold. Thank you. Mu Linger sat down. She ate a few mouthfuls and revealed an inconceivable expression. This meal was simply too delicious. There were only a few ingredients and the seasoning was also very simple. How did he do it? He was in such a bad mood, but he was still in the mood to make such a delicious meal? Mu Linger was actually very hungry. She ate one mouthful after another without stopping. But Jean Z didn't move his chopsticks and just stared at her cold. Mu Linger quickly felt his cold gaze. She held the bowl and turned around, leaving Jean Z with her back. Jean Z clenched his fists. Did this woman have a heart? She was crying so sadly just now, but she was still in the mood to eat? Jean Z's temper wasn't good and his patience was even worse. Even he didn't know why he hadn't been angered to death by this woman yet. After the meal, the two of them didn't speak. It was already late at night. The wind and snow outside were heavy and it was pitch black. The big tigers, wolves, and snow leopards were all guarding outside. Jean Z and Mu Linger didn't leave the stone house. The stone house was really simple. There were only 2 rooms, the bedroom inside and the kitchen outside. There was an empty door in the middle and a curtain between them. The only bed was occupied by the unconscious woman. Jean Z and Mu Linger could only sit. After sitting for a while, Jean Z went to the kitchen. He spread all the straw on the ground and called a big white tiger to lie on the side. Only then did he call Mu Linger over. Lean on the tiger and sleep. You won't freeze to death. Just make do for one night, he said cold. What about you? Mu Linger asked, who knew that Jean Z would throw her a sentence. None of your business. After saying that, he ran to the bedroom. Mu Linger stomped her foot and muttered, Can't you talk nicely? She was an impatient person. Other than looking for Chi brother and making medicine, she didn't do anything that required patience. She really didn't know how she could tolerate Jean Z again and again. If she didn't tolerate it, they would probably quarrel with each other every time they spoke. Mu Linger lay on the straw and leaned into the big white tiger's arms. It was strange. Perhaps it was because she trusted Jean Z enough, but she didn't know when she started to be afraid of tigers. Not only big white, but as long as it was a tiger that he tamed, she wouldn't be afraid. Mu Linger lay on the bed. She was obviously exhausted, but she couldn't fall asleep. She looked at the door curtain and couldn't help but be curious. What was Jean Z doing in the bedroom? A man and a woman alone, he really didn't shy away. Mu Linger was thinking about it when Jean Z suddenly came out. She immediately closed her eyes and pretended to be asleep. Jean Z found the remaining straw and spread it out in front of Mu Linger. He called for a tiger and lay on the tiger's body like Mu Linger. Thus, the two of them became a man and a woman alone. They were very close to each other. As long as she stretched out her legs, they would touch his legs. Mu Linger was originally quite relaxed, but now, she felt uncomfortable all over. After a long time, she secretly opened her eyes and saw Jean Z with his head lowered and his arms crossed. He seemed to be asleep. Mu Linger finally dared to open her eyes and look at him seriously. He was really, really good-looking. Other than Chi brother, she had never seen such a good-looking man. Chi brother was very good-looking like a demon, but he was very, very good-looking. Who exactly was he? Mu Linger stared at him blankly. As she was thinking, Jean Z suddenly reached out and covered his face. Mu Linger was shocked and her face immediately turned red. This guy was actually not asleep. Chapter 1294. Jean Z covered his face with his hands. Mu Linger immediately lowered her head, not daring to look at him again. After a moment of silence, Jean Z said unhappily. If you can't sleep, think about how to answer my question. Mu Linger turned over and buried her head in the big tiger's warm embrace. At this moment, Jean Z put down his hands. He looked at Mu Linger, his cold eyes finally showing helplessness and doting. There were many times when he was so angry that he wanted to flip out, but he couldn't do anything about it. The two of them were silent like this. The whole world was quiet, leaving only the howling of the north wind outside. Not knowing if Mu Linger was asleep, Jean Z kept staring at Mu Linger. As he stared and stared, he fell asleep. It must be known that he hadn't rested for several days. He had been drenched by the rain and snow several times. In fact, he had already caught a cold, but he was still holding on. The next day, when Mu Linger woke up, Jean Z was already gone. She quickly ran to the bedroom and saw Jean Z standing by the bed, looking at the woman in a daze. She walked in. Jean Z looked back at her but didn't say anything. Mu Linger walked over and took the woman's pulse. She also checked her injuries and said indifferently, "It's not life-threatening. It's just an internal injury. She should wake up soon. Let the white tiger send you down the mountain." I went up the mountain to open the road. Last night's snow shouldn't have covered the road. You can leave. Jean Z said indifferently. He was chasing her away again. Mu Linger was angry and immediately refused. "I'm not leaving. If you're not leaving, then what are you staying for? You're in the way." Jean Z said unhappily. "I'm guarding my medicine field and waiting for you, Hughie, to come." "What does that have to do with you? What does it have to do with you?" Mu Linger asked back. Jean Z suddenly turned around, as if he wanted to say something, but he held back. Coldly, he looked at Mu Linger. Mu Linger let him look at her, not afraid. Mu Linger assumed that Jean Z was going to say a bunch of curses and scold her again, but she didn't. However, Jean Z didn't. In the end, he only said one sentence. "This is none of your business. You can leave first." Mu Linger furrowed her brows and puffed up her cheeks. She glared at Jean Z and turned to leave without hesitation. Jean Z even added, "Don't come in if there's nothing important." Mu Linger was already at the door, but she suddenly turned around and said coldly, "I was the one who cleaned up this house. You should be the one leaving. Get out right now and take that woman away too." Jean Z was speechless. He actually carried the woman and walked out of the door in large strides. Mu Linger's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. She followed behind Jean Z, and as soon as Jean Z reached the door, she slammed the door and scolded angrily, "Hugging just anyone? Shameless." She leaned against the door, slid down slowly, and sat down. In her heart, there was only pain. She had never felt so stifled in her life. Even if she was thrown aside by Chi Brother, she would be able to get over it quickly and be filled with energy to continue looking for him. However, facing Jean Z, she couldn't do it. She hated this kind of stifled feeling. It was as if she had fallen into a quagmire and was sinking deeper and deeper. It wasn't that she didn't want to get up, nor did she have the energy to get up, but she didn't know how to get up. She only wanted to escape and didn't want to see him. She leaned against the door and sat with her head on her knees, lying on her stomach. Outside the door, Jean Z stood for a while. He couldn't hear any movement inside the door, and his irritation was written all over his cold face. He casually threw the woman out and she fell onto the snow. He looked around and didn't know where to go, so he simply leaned against the door and sat down. His face was so gloomy that anyone who saw it would be afraid. After sitting for a while, the woman actually moved. She slowly turned over and sat up. Jean Z looked on coldly without a word. After the woman stood up, she suddenly realized that Jean Z was sitting beside her. Her first reaction was to run, but all the beasts that were crouching around her immediately stood up, including the snow leopards and wild wolves that she had previously subdued. What could be more ironic than being betrayed by your own wild beasts? Jean Z's lips curved into a cold smile as he stood up as well. "Who are you? Where did you come from?" Jean Z's voice was as cold as ever, but he deliberately raised his voice. Mu Linger heard Jean Z's voice from inside the room and quickly rose to her feet to peek out the window. The woman looked around and calmed down considerably. She was originally running away from her marriage to Cloud Realm continent. Yesterday, she just arrived at the snowy mountains from Wintercrow country and saw a field of medicinal plants. She never thought she'd run into the Ling clan's long-lost young head. If she couldn't escape, she might as well take a gamble. If she could capture that man and bring him back to the Black Forest, no one would force her to marry him. She'd even become the mistress of the woods. Thinking up to here, the woman couldn't help but feel excited. She said, "I come from the mysterious continent. My name is Feng Ying, the eldest young miss of the Feng clan. You're Ling Gu, the sole heir of the Ling clan's 9th generation. You're the only one in the entire mysterious continent who has the talent to tame tigers and command them. I, on the other hand, can control all kinds of beasts except for the tiger clan. We were betrothed before we were even born, but you were kidnapped before you were even 3 years old." Mu Ling was stunned by her words. Jin Zi, on the other hand, remained expressionless and silent. "I've been looking for you all over the world since I was 13. I never thought I'd find you here. I never thought you'd treat me like this for the sake of a woman." Feng Ying's tears threatened to fall as she spoke. "Both families searched for you for over a decade before they gave up. I was the only one who persisted. I wanted to find you and bring you home." Mu Ling grew even more alarmed. But Jin Zi didn't react. Cold, he asked, "Why should I believe you?" "Because I know there's a scar on your right wrist," Feng Ying said seriously. Jin Zi finally revealed a shocked expression. He didn't expect this woman to know such a secret. However, Feng Ying continued, "This scar will grow with you and slowly spread to your palm." "Who the hell are you?" Jin Zi finally lost his composure. Jin Zi's reaction let Mu Ling know that Feng Ying was telling the truth. "I've already said it very clearly. I'm your fiancé." Feng Ying suddenly pointed at Mu Ling who was hiding behind the window. "Who the hell is she? What's your relationship with her?" Mu Ling was stunned and subconsciously dodged. She leaned against the wall beside the window, not knowing what to do. Soon, she heard Jin Zi's answer. He said, "She's my friend." Jin Zi was skeptical of Feng Ying's words. He could tell that it wasn't that easy to get the truth out of Feng Ying. Instead of doubting Feng Ying, he might as well beat her at her own game. "Friend?" Feng Ying sneered. "You hurt me like this for a friend? I didn't know who you were yesterday." Jin Zi retorted cold. "Since you knew who I was, why didn't you say so earlier? Did you give me a chance to speak?" Feng Ying pretended to be angry and questioned. Yesterday, when he avenged that brat, he didn't give her a chance to explain. Instead, he forced her to apologize before asking about her background. She didn't believe that the brat was only his friend. If it wasn't for the person in her heart, could it be more important than her background? She thought that this couple must have had some conflict and quarreled. No matter what their relationship was, even if they were married, she must get rid of that brat. Marrying him meant owning the entire Black Forest. No matter what methods or lies she used, she must seize this opportunity. Jin Zi didn't argue with Feng Ying. Cold, he asked, "Where is the Ling family on the mysterious continent?" This guy had the ability to tame a tiger, but he didn't know his background. He probably didn't know anything about the mysterious continent. A trace of treachery flashed across Feng Ying's eyes. "Will you go back with me?" "You haven't answered my question yet," Jin Zi said cold. "Will you marry me?" Feng Ying asked again. Jin Zi cold looked at her and didn't answer. Mu Ling leaned against the wall and felt that the whole world was quiet. She waited silently. Not waiting for Jin Zi's answer, Feng Ying hesitated for a moment and pretended to cry. "Ling Gu, you like that brat, right?" Jin Zi still didn't answer. "Okay. If you like that brat, pretend that you didn't meet me. I'll go back by myself. I'll pretend that you're dead and never look for you again." After saying that, she really turned to leave. Jin Zi cold looked at her and was about to speak when Mu Ling suddenly opened the door and said loudly, "Stop! He doesn't like me and I don't like him. We're just friends. He will go with you." Jin Zi suddenly frowned and asked cold, "What right do you have to make the decision for me?" For the first time, Mu Ling looked into Jin Zi's angry eyes so bravely. She wasn't stupid enough to completely believe Feng Ying's words. But this was an opportunity. An opportunity to go to the mysterious continent to find her hometown and family. She believed that with Jin Zi's intelligence, he wouldn't be fooled by Feng Ying and could use Feng Ying to find out about her background. Jin Zi was a man who did things his own way and did as he pleased. He could not be restrained in Northern Li or in the officialdom. He could not stay for her sake. He should return to the place where he truly belonged. Her heart was too small, too weak. She had loved once. She didn't dare and wouldn't love again. Mu Ling said seriously, Jin Zi, leave. Northern Li isn't suitable for you. Such a simple sentence was enough to shatter Goldie's heart. If he wanted to leave, he would have left long ago. He wouldn't have worked so hard in Northern Li for 2 years. Northern Li wasn't suitable for him. So she knew. Jin Zi sneered. Mu Ling, before I leave, shouldn't you settle the score? Score? In Tiger's prison, you owed me a night. In the cave, you owed me a lifetime. A year has passed. Mu Ling, I'm sorry to tell you that I'll add all the interest. Don't even think about leaving my side for the rest of your life. Jin Zi suddenly forced himself in front of Mu Ling and said word by word, You, come with me. He was finally ruthless. After going around in circles and hiding for 2 years, they were still back to square one. It was like a knot that couldn't be untied. No matter how the string was twisted, it would never be untied. Mu Ling only felt weak all over and her mind was in a mess. Actually, she had always remembered what happened in Tiger's prison and the cave. She had also been prepared to repay the debt. But at this moment, she was still caught unprepared. Chapter 1295. Mu Ling was stunned for a long time before she murmured, Jin Zi, if this is a debt, I'll pay it back. If I'm not the person you want me to be, then you can treat me as a debt collector. Jin Zi took Mu Ling's hand and held it tightly. I told you long ago that I need a clean woman. Mu Ling lowered her head and did not speak. Feng Ying did not know what they were talking about. Seeing Jin Zi holding Mu Ling's hand, she was shocked. Lingo, are you really not going back with me for this woman? Do you know that your parents have been going crazy looking for you all these years? Jin Zi did not explain further. He only said coldly, Lead the way. You want to take her back? Feng Ying asked angrily. Jin Zi replied, Don't worry. If you and I really have a marriage contract, I'll definitely marry you if you take me back. Then what about her? What do you mean? Feng Ying asked again. This brat was too much of a hindrance. Are you going or not? Jin Zi paused between each word. It was obvious that he was about to lose his last bit of patience. Feng Ying met his gloomy eyes and was inexplicably afraid. She did not dare to delay. Let's go. Go from the back of the mountain. There's a path there. She could only take one step at a time. This time, the road to Shenkong was still very long. She would definitely get Ling Gu before she reached Shenkong and kill Mu Ling on the way. When Feng Ying said there was a path at the back of the mountain, Jin Zi understood how she went up the mountain. These 3 snowy mountains were located at the border between Wintercrow Country and Northern Li. The sun side of the mountain belonged to Northern Li, while the Yin side belonged to Wintercrow Country. Even so, the 2 countries did not make any big moves on these snowy mountains. It was not for any other reason but because these snowy mountains could not be conquered. There was a path at the back of the mountain. It was very likely that this woman opened it. She went up the snowy mountains from Wintercrow Country. Beyond Wintercrow Country and Northern Li's northern border was the endless ice sea. After Long Fei Yi established the Great Qin State, he set up a few heavily guarded checkpoints at the northern border of Northern Li. It would not be easy for the people of Shenkong to pass through them. This woman must have entered Cloud Realm Continent from the borders of Wintercrow Country and the Ice Sea. The border between Wintercrow Country and the Ice Sea was not closed. Anyone could enter and leave at will. Feng Ying walked in front while Jin Zi held onto Mu Ling's hand and followed behind them. The snow leopards and wild wolves all dispersed while the 10 white tigers and Dabai followed behind them. He didn't know where Dabai had gone last night, but when he reappeared today, His fur was clean again. It was as white as snow and looked especially holy and noble. Dabai didn't know what had happened between his master and Ling Er, but he was very happy to see his master holding Ling Er's hand. They took a detour from the mountainside on the sunny side of the mountain to the mountainside on the shady side of the mountain. Gradually, they saw the vast grassland of Wintercrow covered in snow. Jinzi unconsciously stopped walking as he stared at the sea of snow in a daze. He and Su Donglin hadn't actually entered Wintercrow country when they used the secret passage for official business. This was the first time he'd returned after leaving Wintercrow country. He'd yearned for freedom countless times in the past, but all of it had to do with this land and the vast grasslands, blue skies and white clouds. Who would have thought that he'd come back to see a gloomy sky and a vast expanse of white snow? Who would have thought that he'd come back with a woman who could make him lose all reason? Who would have thought that he'd come back to a land that was no longer his home? Feng saw that Jinzi had stopped walking and said, "I've opened a path. There's a way to get down the mountain. We'll take Wintercrow country and cross the ice sea to reach Shenkong." Jinzi recovered his wits and asked, "The shady side of the mountain is steeper than the sunny side, and the snow has sealed off the path. How did you open a path?" It was precisely because the shady side of the three snowy mountains was so steep that even though this was the border, there weren't any checkpoints on the mountain. Instead, there were a few small checkpoints at the foot of the mountain. If there really was a path that led up the mountain from Wintercrow country, then this path would become the second secret passage. After all, after ascending the snowy mountains, it wouldn't be so difficult to sneak into Great Qin. Perhaps because he was used to being an official in Northern Li, Jinzi silently remembered this matter and planned to tell Long Fei Yi when he returned. He was clearly going to search for his origins and his home, but he was still thinking about coming back. Even he didn't realize his own contradiction. Mu Ling-er, who'd been keeping her head down, also looked up at the vast snowy plains. She didn't make a sound and continued to keep her head down. "We opened it on the path opened by our ancestors. Let's go." Feng Ying didn't explain much. When Jinzi saw the path on the couch, he knew what was going on. This path didn't come up from the foot of the mountain. Instead, it went down from the mountain, and a large part of the path had to slide down with the help of snow and ice. It was obvious that this path was a secret passage opened by Juni Xie, a secret passage from Northern Li to Wintercrow country. Perhaps Juni Xie wanted to avoid Wintercrow country's borders, or perhaps Juni Xie wanted to hide from the spies of the Northern Dynasty's emperors. Jinzi didn't make any more guesses. Juni Xie was dead, and Northern Li was destroyed. These things were meaningless. Jinzi didn't ask Feng Ying anything else, and Feng Ying was also silent. She would occasionally look back at Mu Ling-er, and she was thinking of some evil ideas along the way. The three of them walked from morning to night, circling around half of the snowy mountains, and finally reached a steep slope. Feng Ying pulled over the sled that was placed at the side and said, "It took me a day to climb up. If we go down, we'll be there soon. Let's hurry up before it gets dark. There are herdsmen at the foot of the mountain who can stay overnight." Jinzi glanced at the sled and asked coldly, "Do you know how to do it?" "Of course I do. It's very easy. Don't you know how to do it? I'll teach you," Feng Ying quickly replied. However, Jinzi ignored her and said coldly, "Answer me." He was asking Mu Ling-er. Mu Ling-er didn't know what she was thinking. Jinzi tightened his grip, and she came back to her senses, looking confused. "This thing, do you know how to do it?" Jinzi's tone was very unpleasant, but he still had patience. Mu Ling-er didn't say anything and only shook her head. Feng Ying sneered in her heart. Even if this girl didn't know how to do it, so what? The sled here were all for one person, and couldn't bear the weight of two people at all. On this steep slope, she must kill Mu Ling-er, who knew that Jinzi borrowed a sword from her and chopped down a big tree, cutting down a section of wood that was of moderate length, so that two people could sit on it. He didn't even say a word to Feng Ying as he pulled Mu Ling-er to sit on the long piece of wood, and the two of them slid down together. Feng Ying was so angry that she stomped her feet and hurriedly stepped onto the sled to chase after them. At the start, the slope wasn't too steep and Mu Ling-er didn't have much of a reaction. But as the slope became steeper and steeper, The speed of the wood sliding became faster and faster. Mu Ling-er's heartbeat also started to speed up. She sat in front while Jin Zi sat behind her and hugged her tightly. But the angle of the dive still gave her a fright. Ah! She couldn't help but cry out in shock as she closed her eyes. The more she screamed, the tighter Jin Zi hugged her, wishing that he could embed this woman into his arms and never let her go. Amidst Mu Ling-er's screams, Jin Zi asked in a low voice, "Ling-er, I'm sorry. I finally forced you. I admit that I can't do without you." Mu Ling-er didn't reply because Jin Zi's words were drowned out by her screams and the whistling of the wind. If the steep slope was infinitely long, how great would that be? But unfortunately, even the longest road would have an end, much less a steep slope. Very quickly, they slid down the mountain and slid into a forest covered with ice and snow. Feng followed closely behind, and when she saw Jin Zi hugging Mu Ling-er tightly and not letting go, she couldn't help but feel jealous. Originally, she only wanted that man for the power of the Black Forest, but now, she realized that she wanted him from the bottom of her heart, and also couldn't tolerate Mu Ling-er, this wretched lass, from the bottom of her heart. Mu Ling-er closed her eyes and curled up into a ball in Jin Zi's arms. She had yet to recover from her shock, and Jin Zi hugged her tightly, not regaining his senses from the warmth. They sat there quietly, claiming to be in a quiet world. However, Feng quickly broke this beautiful silence. "Let's go quickly or we'll freeze to death if we don't have a place to stay tonight," she urged and added, "You'd better not bring those tigers along or no herdsman will take you in." Jin Zi still ignored her, but Mu Ling-er slowly opened her eyes and realized that she had landed safely on flat ground. She heaved a sigh of relief and quickly realized that she was in Jin Zi's tight embrace. She seemed to want to say something but swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. Was it useful for her to say anything more? The more she spoke, the more noisy she would be. She also ignored Feng, who was standing at the side, and continued to lower her head, remaining silent like a mute. "Did you hear that? Let's go quickly." Feng was burning with anger, and was about to push Mu Ling-er away when she was stunned by Jin Zi's deep gaze. Jin Zi let go of Mu Ling-er but didn't forget to pull her up. Feng threw him an aggrieved and dissatisfied look, but Jin Zi pretended not to see it. He dismissed all the tigers and said coldly, "Lead the way." The three of them spent 2 hours and finally saw signs of human habitation when it was late at night. The herdsmen were warm and hospitable, but unfortunately, they didn't have any extra space and could only let Jin Zi stay in a small tent to store firewood. The old woman took out the best sheepskin in the house and laid it on the haystack. Then, she took out a quilt and carefully laid it out. She chuckled and said, "Young master, it's very warm like this. Don't worry, these 2 girls will sleep in my daughter's room. Tomorrow morning, Auntie will make pancakes for you to eat." Feng was overjoyed and knew that her chance had come. However, Jin Zi hugged Mu Ling-er and said, "She'll sleep here with me." The old woman glanced at Mu Ling-er suspiciously. Seeing that Jin Zi's expression wasn't good, she didn't dare to ask more and just nodded and left. Once the old woman left, Feng was furious. You guys, Ling-gu, how can you be like this? I'm your fiancé after all. We'll leave at sunrise tomorrow. You can go out now." Jin Zi interrupted cold. What do you take me for? If you're like this, I won't take you back. I'll leave by myself." Feng ran out in a huff. She thought that Jin Zi would chase after her, but who knew that Jin Zi would only give her the sound of the door slamming shut. No matter how many lies, schemes, they were all useless in front of someone who couldn't be bothered to pay attention to you. At least, in front of Jin Zi's indifference, they wouldn't be able to do anything. The sound of the door slamming shut shattered Feng's evil plan and also woke Mu Ling-er up. She slowly turned back to look at the tightly shut wooden door. Her originally stiff body became even stiffer and she couldn't help but tremble. What was Jin Zi trying to do? Chapter 1296. Mu Ling-er was really frightened, but Jin Zi didn't actually want to do anything. He was already tired to the limit. His mind was heavy and he was starting to feel cold. He let go of Mu Ling and without saying a word, he took off his coat and went to sleep under the blanket. Mu Ling was in disbelief. She stood there in a daze until her legs were sore. She saw that Jinzi seemed to have fallen asleep and didn't move at all. Her wildly beating heart gradually calmed down. She had scared herself too much this time. She looked around and found that all the straw in the tent had been spread on the ground and covered with lamb fur. There were only piles of thorny firewood left. She couldn't even find a suitable place to sit. She could either squat at the side or sit beside Jinzi. She hesitated for a while and actually chose to squat at the side. As the night deepened, the temperature became colder. Mu Ling feet and hands gradually became cold. She had no choice but to stand up. She rubbed her hands and jumped on the spot to warm herself up. After a while, Jinzi suddenly lifted the blanket. Mu Ling jumped in fright and subconsciously retreated. Jinzi coldly sized her up. She immediately lowered her head and didn't move. "Come here," Jinzi said coldly. He already didn't want to scold her for being stupid. Standing like this in the middle of the night, didn't she know that she would get sick from the cold? Wasn't she usually fierce? Why was she so clingy now? Didn't she know that she should come over and snatch the blanket? If she came over to snatch it, would he not let her? She was simply too stupid to be saved. Mu Ling didn't move at all. It was as if she didn't hear Jinzi's words. Jinzi saw that her lips were purple from the cold and became even angrier. He directly shouted at her. "Did you hear me when I asked you to come over? Do you want me to say it a third time?" Mu Ling still didn't move. Jinzi raised his head and closed his eyes. He was silent for a while before saying, "Come over. You owe me that night. It's time to pay it back." Mu Ling tightly pursed her lips. She was about to cry, but she still didn't move. "Come here yourself. Don't make me do it." Goldie was determined. Mu Ling abruptly raised her head to look at him. Her large, watery eyes were filled with tears, as if they would burst at any moment. She still didn't move. Finally, Jinzi got up and rushed in front of her, pulling off her belt. Mu Ling closed her eyes and raised her head, stubbornly refusing to let her tears fall. After Jinzi took off her light yellow cotton-padded jacket, he carried her in his arms. He clearly felt her trembling, but he didn't say a word. He carried her to lie down on the lamb's fur and pulled the blanket over her head. Hiding in the quilt, Mu Ling suddenly felt warm, but her heart also fell into the ice cellar. She curled up into a ball and trembled slightly, not daring to imagine what would happen next. Jinzi laid down behind her, but he didn't touch her again. He just lay next to her, his eyes wide open as he stared blankly at the top of the tent. Mu Ling waited for a long time and was afraid for a long time, but Jinzi didn't move. She carefully opened her eyes. Her gaze was complicated. There was uneasiness, relief, doubt, confusion, pain, and tears. She couldn't help but recall that night in Tiger's Denver. That night in Tiger's den, he discovered the truth that she wasn't pregnant. He sat on her body like a hooligan and checked her stomach. She struggled with all her might and only calmed down after he warned her. Later on, the two of them clearly got up, but he suddenly pressed her down and kissed her to silence her cries, avoiding Uncle Chung. Just like that, he found out the truth about Sister Jing's pregnancy. Helpless, she begged him to keep it a secret, but he shamelessly made a condition. He said, "How about sleeping with me for a night?" She slapped him on the spot, but in the end, she had no choice but to agree. She remembered clearly that night when he brought her back to the room, threw her onto the bed harshly, and immediately took advantage of her. She was so frightened that she cried and begged him not to, but he punched the side of her head and yelled at her. She clearly didn't try to remember it, but she still remembered what he yelled at her on the bed that night. "If you're scared, why did you agree to it? Why did you agree to it? Why don't you fucking cherish yourself? How am I supposed to cherish you?" Just like that, he helped her keep the secret of her fake pregnancy, and she owed him a night. She knew very well what kind of night it was. Jinzi didn't move. Mu Ling's heart was equally uneasy. She couldn't see through him after all. She was so tired that she wanted to die, but she didn't dare to sleep. Her body didn't even dare to relax. Suddenly, Jinzi opened his mouth and said, "Mu Linger, are you asleep?" Mu Linger was frightened and didn't dare to answer. Jinzi slowly turned over, hugged her from behind, and leaned his whole body against hers. She didn't know if it was because the lamb's fur and bedding were too warm, but when Jinzi came close, Mu Linger felt the entire bed warming up. She could clearly feel his hands slowly wrap around her waist and slowly tighten his hold. She could feel his body pressing against her back and his long legs wrapped around hers. She could feel herself slowly being imprisoned in his arms, and it was getting warmer and warmer. But everything stopped there. His hands were very quiet. They only hugged her waist and didn't move. He hugged her tightly just like that and returned to silence. Was that it? Was that all he wanted for a night? Mu Linger opened her eyes wide, and she was no longer sleepy. After a long time, she suddenly heard him whisper in her ear, "Little fool, be good and sleep. Don't be afraid, I can't bear to do it." His voice was very, very gentle. It was completely different from the coldness from before. It sounded like a lover's whisper, but also like the ravings of a delirious person. Mu Linger heard it, and the tears that she had been hiding in her eyes suddenly fell. Jinzi. She choked the moment she opened her mouth. "Why are you so nice? Why are you so stubborn? What do you want me to do with you?" "Jinzi, I've given all my love to Chi brother. I've given it all away. How should I love you?" Mu Linger felt so bad that she started to cry softly. However, Jinzi didn't hear her words and didn't realize that she was crying. Jinzi was already delirious from his high fever. His whole body was hot, and his face was red. Mu Linger pulled down the blanket and turned around, wanting to ask him properly. But when she turned around, Mu Linger then realized that Jinzi was acting strangely. So it wasn't because the blanket was too warm, but because he had a fever. His whole body was burning hot. Mu Linger touched his forehead and was frightened by the temperature. She almost gave herself a slap. She was a pharmacist. The person beside her was burning up and she didn't even notice it. She hurriedly took Jinzi's pulse. Once she took his pulse, she started to cry. Jinzi had caught a very, very severe cold. It must have accumulated over the past few days to become like this. God knows how much he had suffered in order to find her. When she met a patient, she would always be anxious but not flustered. But this time she was flustered. She started to mumble to herself, "Medicine, my medicine? Where's my medicine?" Luckily, she had the habit of carrying a medicine bag with her. She didn't care about the cold and hurriedly got up. She grabbed the medicine bag on the ground and took out a bunch of dried herbs and rushed out of the door. Bang, bang, bang. She frantically knocked on the old lady's door. The old lady's family hurriedly opened the door. When they saw her crying face, they were scared to tears. "Miss, what's wrong?" Mu Linger didn't realize that she had been crying. She said, "Jinzi is sick. I want to help him boil his medicine. I want to help him boil his medicine. Quick." The old lady then understood and hurriedly brought Mu Linger to the kitchen to help start the fire. Feng Ying had long been woken up by Mu Linger's knocking on the door. Just as the old lady and Mu Linger were busy in the kitchen, she secretly slipped out and sneaked into Jinzi's tent. She glanced at the cotton-padded jacket on the ground and then looked at Jinzi. She muttered softly, "Sick." She carefully walked closer and saw Jinzi hugging the bedding and muttering something in his sleep. She didn't know what he was saying. She leaned closer and listened carefully. She only heard a name, Linger. He was already so sick, but he was still thinking about that stinky lass. Feng Ying's jealousy was about to burn. She was the most beautiful person in the Black Forest. Why did she have to marry someone she didn't like? Why couldn't she marry the most honorable man in the Black Forest? A trace of ruthlessness flashed past her eyes. She took off her clothes without hesitation and hugged Jinzi. "I'm Linger. I'm here." She wrapped her arms around Jinzi and pulled his hand to touch her body. "Linger, Mu Linger." Jinzi's eyes were tightly shut and he was in a daze. He didn't know that Mu Linger had already left. He always thought that Mu Linger was still by his side, still in his arms. He hugged the person in his arms tightly again. His hand was still wrapped around her waist. He only wanted to hug her and trap her. That was all. However, the person in his arms was restless. She pulled his hand and moved it inch by inch down her abdomen. Her hand kept teasing him. He still pulled away. Linger, you can't. I don't want to force you. I don't want to force you. Linger. Be good. Just let me hug you. Linger. Why didn't I meet you earlier? Why? When Fengying heard these words, she more or less knew what was going on. Her jealousy towards Mu Linger deepened by 3 points. She broke free from Jin Zi's hand and took off his clothes even more boldly, teasing him unabashedly. Just as Jin Zi was about to pull her hand away, she suddenly leaned over to his ear and said softly, "I'm willing. I like you." When these words came out, Jin Zi obviously froze. However, he quickly flipped over and pressed Fengying under him. His brows were tightly knitted and he had a splitting headache. However, he still slowly opened his eyes. He wanted to look at her. He wanted to look at her and hear her say those words. He forced himself to hold on and slowly opened his eyes. However, the figure in front of him was swaying as if there were countless shadows. He couldn't see her clearly. He lowered his head and buried his head in her body. Just at this moment, the wooden door suddenly opened and he didn't even realize it. It was until a bang sound came from the door that he was jolted awake. He subconsciously turned back to take a look and saw Mu Linger standing at the door with tears streaming down her face. Her hands were hanging in the air. Beneath her feet, a bowl of medicine was scattered all over the ground. "Linger," he muttered and was stunned for a moment before he lowered his head to look at the person beneath him. In an instant, he was completely awake. Both of them were naked. What did he do just now? Fengying looked towards Mu Linger and a cold smile flashed past her eyes. Although this stinky lass had come too quickly and caused her to not be able to cook the rice. But letting this stinky lass witness this scene with her own eyes might not be a bad thing. Fengying waiting for Mu Linger to turn around and run away. However, Chapter 1297. When Mu Linger saw this scene, she did not turn around and run away. She regained her senses and suddenly rushed in front of Jin Zi and Fengying. She did not know where she got the strength from, but she pushed Jin Zi away and gave Fengying a fierce slap. Fengying did not expect this and had not recovered from the slap. Jin Zi was weak all over and could not get up after being pushed to the side. He looked at Mu Linger, whose face was covered in tears. He wanted to explain but did not know how to. He had no idea what had happened. His memory stopped at hugging Mu Linger and falling asleep. He really could not remember what happened after that. Mu Linger glared at Jin Zi angrily before turning around and running out. Mu Linger! Jin Zi panicked. At this time, Fengying regained her senses and muttered, "She hit me? She dared to hit me." Jin Zi coldly looked at Fengying. Although his body was weak, his eyes revealed a terrifying killing intent. The anger emitted from his body grew stronger and stronger. Seeing this, Fengying could not help but retreat in fear. I heard that you were sick, so I came over to take a look," Fengying hurriedly quibbled. "Who knew that you would? Lingo? You bullied me. Why are you still so fierce?" Jin Zi defended her and did not even need to ask the truth. He said coldly, "I'm going to kill you. Lingu, you." Fengying subconsciously retreated. Even though she knew that Jin Zi did not have the strength to truss a chicken, even though she knew that she could control this man at any time, she was still afraid. She was so afraid that she forgot to make a move and only knew to retreat and hide. His eyes were too terrifying. Very quickly, Fengying sensed a group of beasts approaching. She had been with beasts since she was young and understood that kind of aura too well. The outside of the tent must have been surrounded by beasts. They were all filled with killing intent. Because the man in front of her really wanted to kill her. Fengying's back hit the pile of firewood and she had no way to retreat. She finally revealed her true colors. "Let me go and I'll tell you everything." Jin Zi was indifferent. Although he did not move, the cold killing intent in his eyes pressed towards Fengying, as if he could kill her at any time. The more silent Jin Zi was, the more terrified Feng Ying was. "I'll tell you everything about the Ling family, the whole truth, and you'll let me go." Jin Zi was definitely not interested in what she had to say. Coldly, he stared at her and growled like a beast. This was the sound of calling for a beast. Feng Ying's entire body trembled. She suddenly rolled to the side and grabbed a dagger. Since he couldn't have her and wanted her to die, then he might as well die. She pulled out her dagger and stabbed at Jin Zi. However, before she could stab the gold, she was pushed to the ground by the big white tiger that rushed in. "No!" Feng Ying shouted, but her voice was quickly stopped by the big white tiger's fangs. Dabai grabbed her by the neck and dragged her out of the room without any hesitation. He took note of the bloodstains on the ground. Outside the tent were all ferocious beasts. All the ferocious beasts on the grassland had come. Tigers, snow leopards, wolves, and even a few big lions surrounded the few tents. The big white tiger dragged Feng Ying out and threw her far away onto the snowy ground. Feng Ying was bitten on the neck and was bleeding profusely, but she was still on the verge of death. However, very quickly, the surrounding wild beasts all pounced over to fight for food and drowned her. This kind of fear before death was probably unimaginable. To Feng Ying, it was really a fate worse than death. The livestock in the nearby sheep pen and horse pen were all frightened. They kept neighing and bumping around. The herdsman's family had already hidden, not daring to look outside. Mu Linger's whereabouts were unknown, because there was no sign of her. In just a short while, the ferocious beasts all dispersed, leaving behind a pool of blood and a pile of bones on the snowy ground. Feng Ying, who had controlled all kinds of ferocious beasts since young, definitely did not expect that she would die in such a way. Peace returned to the grassland. In the tent, Jin Zi lay on the ground. He had a splitting headache and was shivering nonstop. He wanted to get up and find Mu Linger, but he could not use any strength. Not to mention getting up, he could not even turn over. He tried a few times, but he could not stand up in the end. He could only give up. He looked at the top of the tent and slowly lifted his bangs. His extremely beautiful eyes were gradually covered with a layer of despair. In this life, even if he was locked in a cage as a slave, even if he was bought to the three-way black market and sold in the market with a clear price, he had never been so desperate. Pain slowly appeared in this despair. He slowly closed his eyes and no longer saw any emotions in them. His body was weak and his heart was weak. He did not know if he had given up on the world or if the world had given up on him. At this moment, hurried footsteps came from outside the door and approached him. He heard it, but he was indifferent. He only thought that the herdsman had come to save him. However, it was Mu Linger who came. She carried the freshly brewed medicinal decoction and rushed over with a hurried expression. The moment she entered, she saw Jin Zi lying naked on the ground. Half of his body was naked and the other half was covered in the blanket. He raised his hands high to cover his forehead. Although Mu Linger was very anxious, she still stopped in her tracks when she saw this scene. Her gaze unconsciously moved down Jin Zi's hands, arms, and shoulders. It was hard to imagine that such a skinny person could have such a refined body. Just the lines of his arms were perfect, as if they were carved. His shoulders were not as weak as they usually looked. They were not broad, but they were broad and refined. They were sexy and full of strength. Could it be related to his clothes? The more Mu Linger looked, the more amazed she was. The more she looked, the more she could not help but look down. She could see his perfect chest and abdominal muscles. They were so well defined that they looked like a sculpture. She couldn't stop her gaze from moving down his abdominal muscles. The lines became more refined as she moved down, and they were even more breathtaking. She blushed and blushed. It was not until her line of sight was blocked by the blanket that Mu Linger suddenly regained her senses. The medicine in her hand almost fell to the ground again. Are all men's bodies so beautiful? This question surfaced in Mu Linger's mind. She hurriedly shook her head and ignored this thought. She put the medicine aside and hurriedly pulled the blanket over Jin Zi tightly. Jin Zi's eyes were tightly shut. He was immersed in despair and was indifferent to the movements around him. It was only when Mu Ling touched his hand that he was shocked and recognized her hand immediately. He opened his eyes abruptly. Sure enough, he saw the face that he had missed for more than 2 years. Her face was full of tears and she looked like a pitiful person. He was obviously in despair, but at this moment he smiled. He gently wiped away the tears at the corner of her eyes and said gently, "Mu Ling, I dreamed of you again." He thought that he would never see her again, not even dream of her. Mu Ling was stunned. She hurriedly avoided his gentle gaze and his hand. She touched his forehead. Although she had expected it, she was still shocked by the temperature. He was already sick, and after the torment just now, his condition had worsened. She hurriedly took his pulse. Sure enough, his condition had worsened. The medicine would definitely worsen his condition, but his condition was too urgent. If she hesitated any longer or came any later, his brain would have been burned out. She did not have time to brew the medicine again. She had to let Jinzi drink this bowl of medicine first to slow down his condition. "Get up and drink the medicine. Hurry! This is not a dream," Mu Ling said seriously. She used all her strength to pull Jinzi up to sit. Unfortunately, she could not move him at all. This guy looked so thin, but she could not tell how heavy he was. She had already personally tested it. If Jinzi had the strength to move, he would have gone out to look for her. He did not even have the strength to turn over. "Be good. Sit down quietly and let me take a good look." Jinzi still thought that he was immersed in a dream. In the past 2 years, he had dreamed of her too often. He would dream of her every few days. He would always wonder if it was because he dreamed of her so often that he could not let go or forget her. Mu Ling was anxious. "It's not a dream, it's real. If you don't get up to drink the medicine, you'll turn stupid from the fever. You'll be even more stupid than me. Get up." This fellow scolded her every day that she was stupid. She was the real stupid one, all right. He was already so sick. How could he still dream? No matter how anxious Mu Ling was, Jinzi did not move. He looked at her, and as he looked, he started to laugh foolishly. Mu Ling was about to die from anxiety. But seeing him laugh, she couldn't help but take another look at his eyes. This fellow who never smiled, why did he look so good when he smiled? Especially those eyes. "Get up!" Mu Ling used all her strength to pull and pull at Jinzi. After a long time, she still could not move him. Seeing that Jinzi was still looking at her and laughing foolishly, she was about to go crazy. She simply took the medicine and drank a big mouthful. She decisively lowered her head and kissed Jinzi's lips, passing the medicine over. Jinzi froze. He was originally still in a daze, but this time, he immediately sobered up. He was forced to accept it and drank a big mouthful of medicine. Mu Ling let go of him, and very quickly, she fed him another mouthful. In this way, the big bowl of medicine was fed 5 times by Mu Ling and it was finally finished. Mu Ling heaved a sigh of relief and was wiping away the stains on the corners of her mouth. Who knew that Jinzi suddenly stretched out his hand and held her neck, pressing her down and kissing her lips. Mu Ling had not even regained her senses when he went straight in and deeply entangled with her, becoming incomparably lingering. Only God knew how deep this kiss was. Mu Ling did not even have the chance to struggle. She could only allow Jinzi to wantonly demand until he was satisfied. Her first kiss had been snatched by him, and she had also been forcefully kissed by him before. But it was not as intense and deep as this one. Not only did Mu Ling not have the chance to struggle, she even felt that she could not take it. He was too passionate, too forceful, and too emotional. She could not even tell if he was demanding from her or giving to her. When Jinzi let go of Mu Ling was lying on top of him, panting. Her red lips were swollen and her face was flushed red. She was completely dazed. Jinzi licked his lips and looked at her as if he was looking at his prey. He could not wait to pounce over and eat her again. The moment she met his devilish gaze, Mu Ling threw a punch at Jinzi's chest. "Bastard! So I'm not dreaming." Jinzi could not help but chuckle. You're pretending. You did it on purpose. You lied to me to feed you medicine." Mu Ling was so angry that her face turned red and she wiped her lips with all her might. But Jean Z's gaze suddenly turned ruthless. Cold, he said, "Mu Ling, I really don't have any strength now. Otherwise, I'll definitely eat you up." Mu Ling was so frightened that she fell to the side. She turned around and was about to escape when Jean Z asked indifferently, "Why did you come back to save me? I thought that after you left, you wouldn't care about me anymore." She had bumped into Feng Ying's matter. She even boiled the medicine and came back. Chapter 1298. Faced with Jean Z's question, Mu Ling turned around and said something that Jean Z would never forget for the rest of his life. She said, "Jean Z, you were almost raped by that woman. I thought about it. You saved me after all. I can't let you be defiled by others." Jean Z was dumbfounded and could not speak for a long time. Mu Ling was not stupid. She had taken Jean Z's pulse and knew very well how sick he was. Moreover, she had only left for a short while. Jean Z could not have seduced that woman. It was obvious that the woman had thrown herself at him. She ran out of the door and stood there for a while before she figured out what had happened. She wanted to go back, but when she saw the tigers approaching, she knew that Jean Z would be fine. Thus, she hurried to brew the medicine again. To the seriously ill Jean Z, medicine was the most important thing. When she came out with the medicine, she saw a pool of blood and a human skeleton in the snow. She had always been timid, but when she saw that scene, she was not afraid at all. She did not feel that it was cruel. Instead, she felt an indescribable sense of satisfaction. She felt that she had become bad. Jean Z had a lot to say, but he did not know what to say in the face of Mu Ling-er's answer. He only felt humiliated, angry, and helpless. In the end, all the words he wanted to say were reduced to 2 words. "Come here." Mu Ling did not move. She asked, "How are you going to go to the mysterious continent after killing that woman? How are you going to find your hometown?" "Come here and I'll tell you," Jean Z said calmly. Mu Ling did not go over. Instead, she grabbed the medicine bag on the ground and ran out without a word. She did not run far. She stood at the door and raised her head to let the cold wind hit her face to wake her up. Her lips were still swollen and painful. His breath lingered on them. She touched her lips gently, her heart beating faster. Her heart was even more chaotic than before. She really did not know what to do with him. She was getting more and more clueless. She did not even realize that she had unknowingly lost her previous decisiveness. She did not go anywhere. She only went to brew a new batch of medicine. She boiled the medicine and sent it to the tent, only to find that Jean Z was asleep. She carefully touched his forehead, checked his temperature, and then took his pulse. After making sure that his condition was better, her hanging heart finally relaxed. She nudged him. "Hey, get up and take your medicine." She thought that it would take a long time for him to wake up. However, when she pushed him, he opened his eyes. He was pretending to be asleep again. She frowned as she looked at him. Her tear-stained face made her look like an old woman. This time, he didn't pretend. He struggled to sit up, took the medicine from her, and drank it in big gulps. After drinking all the medicine, he said, "You're here again. I thought you wouldn't come back again." He hadn't even asked her why she had come back. She gave her answer first. "Since I've saved him to the end. So we're even now, right?" "No." He smiled weakly. "You were the one who begged me to help you. Today I didn't force you to save me. The 2 of us cannot be reconciled." Actually, she was just saying it casually. She knew very well that he was so smart that he wouldn't agree to it. The 2 of them remained silent. The sky was still dark, and this was the coldest time. There was no heater in the tent. Mu Ling sat for a while, and her hands and feet started to feel cold. She unconsciously rubbed her hands together. "I'll lend it to you." Jean Z grabbed his fur robe and threw it to her. Mu Ling did not reject it and wrapped herself tightly in the fur robe. The 2 of them fell silent again. They sat like this and waited for dawn. Some people said that the darkness before dawn was always unusually long. Mu Ling realized that this saying was true. She waited and waited, but time passed very slowly. The sky in the grassland was still dark. She was already wrapped in a fox fur robe, but why was it still so cold? The cold air kept rising from her feet, and she was so cold that she shivered. Finally, Jean Z broke the silence. Coldly, he said, "Mu Ling, I'm giving you one last chance. If you come over, I'll consider this night as repayment to me. Otherwise, I'll really charge you interest." Mu Ling looked up, her gaze guarded. Jean Z sneered, "If you fall ill from the cold, who's going to brew medicine for me? You know that I can't do anything now." Mu Ling-er's mood was originally very heavy, but after hearing his words, she couldn't help but burst into laughter. He didn't have much strength, so he really couldn't bully her. Despite laughing, Mu Ling still didn't move. She asked pitifully, "Then will you still marry me?" This woman was insatiable and wanted a yard after getting an inch. Jean Z had said so many times that he would marry her, but when had he ever been serious? He was afraid that he had completely lost to her. He said, "No." Mu Ling still didn't go over. She stuck out her pinky. "Pinky promise. Lie. If you lie, you'll lose every bet." Jean Z very straightforwardly made a pinky promise with her and swore a deadly oath. Mu Ling finally felt at ease. She took off her outer robe and obediently crawled over, sneaking into the warm blanket. This night, she had already planned for the worst, but she didn't expect it to turn out like this. As long as she waited until daybreak, she and Jean Z would be even. Mu Ling lay on her side, allowing Jean Z to slowly approach her from behind. However, when Jean Z came over and hugged her, her heart instantly skipped a beat. She then remembered that Jean Z wasn't wearing any clothes. Ah! Jean Z covered her mouth with one hand, while the other held her waist tightly. She was really frightened and struggled desperately. However, Jean Z somehow had the strength to imprison her tightly. She couldn't struggle at all. Very soon, Jean Z whispered something into her ear, making her quiet down. He said, "Mu Ling, you'd better not move. Otherwise, I'll go back on all my promises to you." Mu Ling-er's struggle came to an abrupt end. Jean Z's legs wrapped around her, entangling with her. Two people, two hearts, like two long threads, entangled into a ball, becoming more and more inextricable and unable to merge back into one. Mu Ling didn't move and Jean Z didn't move either. However, he leaned close to her ear and whispered. He said, "Ling, I like you. I like you very much." He said, "Ling, you're so stupid. Why do I still like you?" He said, "Ling, if I met you first, would you have belonged to me?" He said, "Ling, do you know how it feels to like someone? I don't want to give up even if I die, unless I see her in pain." Ling, is Gu very happy and not in pain at all? So, you didn't give up? He must like you, right? Ling, I give up. Be happy, don't cry anymore. He sighed softly. Ling, don't be so stupid to agree to things like that in the future. You have to cherish yourself, understand? He chuckled. Gu came out of seclusion a few months ago and headed north. He should be going to the mysterious continent. You can leave when the sun rises. I've already paid off the debt of that gold card. I'll stay in Wintercrow. Remember, don't come here again. After he finished speaking, he let go of her. The sky was bright. The darkness before dawn was so long. But why did dawn always come so suddenly? Why did the whole world become so bright without anyone noticing? Mu Ling slowly sat up and looked outside. Only then did she realize that her vision was all blurry and she couldn't see any light. She touched her face and realized that she was crying. Her face was full of tears. Jean Z was still in his original position, lying on his side. Mu Ling sat in a daze and kept wiping her tears. However, she didn't know why, but the more she wiped, the more tears came. It was as if there was no end to them. In the end, she couldn't help burying her head in her knees and sobbing loudly. Why was she in so much pain? Why was it that she was free? Why was it that they didn't owe each other anything? Why was it that she could leave? Why was it that they would never meet again? Why was it that she knew where Chi brother had gone? But why wasn't she happy at all? Why couldn't she stop crying? What did it feel like to like someone? Would she not give up even if she died unless she saw the other person in pain? But she didn't see Chi brother in pain. She didn't see Chi brother unhappy. But she had also given up. She had already given up 2 years ago. She liked Chi brother so much, so why did she give up? She hated Jean Z so much, so why was she crying now? Mu Ling was crying uncontrollably. She refused to leave and didn't say a word. Jean Z frowned as he looked at her. He didn't know what to do. She cried when he forced her to stay. She cried when he let her go. What should he do to make her happier? He suddenly shouted, Mu Ling, don't cry. Go. Get out. Would she only wake up if he was more fierce? Mu Ling suddenly looked up and asked in a choked voice, Jean Z, why did you scheme against me? Why did you bully me? Why did you force me? If it wasn't for the scheme at Three-Way Black Market, would she have resented him? Would she have made him owe such a huge debt? If he didn't bully her, would she have owed him so much? I'll apologize to you, all right? Jean Z was irritated by her crying. I won't force you anymore. I won't force you ever again. You can leave. Who knew that Mu Ling cried even harder? Jean Z, you've always forced me. Always forced me. Why didn't you force me to the end? Why? Why did you make me so miserable? Jean Z, I've given up on Chi brother. I don't want to like anyone anymore. It's really tiring to like someone. I don't want to be so tired. I'm fine all by myself. So why did you bully me? Why did you force me to see you? Why did you say so much to me? Why did you like me? Why? Mu Ling cried her heart out, as if all the forbearance that she had endured all this time had burst out. Rather than saying that she had given up on Chi brother, it was more accurate to say that she had been abandoned. She had been abandoned a long time ago. She had never been liked. It was just that her reaction was too slow. It took her a few years to understand. She was like a lovelorn patient who had been in unrequited love. She had never been loved and had never been in love, but she had experienced the pain of love. Jean Z, Chi brother isn't in pain at all. How can I give up on him? How can I give up on him? I've liked him for so many years. How can I? She cried and looked at Jean Z. She was in a mess and in pain, but she also blamed herself. Jean Z's heart ached so much that he couldn't speak. He didn't expect this girl to be so stupid. Why not? He asked angrily, Mu Ling what do you owe him? Why not? Liking someone isn't a responsibility. Loving someone isn't a responsibility either. Marrying someone is a responsibility. Mu Ling I regret it. I want to marry you. As he spoke, he suddenly pulled Mu Ling over and pressed her under his body. Mu Ling was still crying, but he kissed her wildly. Chapter 1299. Mu Ling if I force you, I can make you wake up from your endless and hopeless persistence. I'm willing to be the bad guy. I'm willing for you to hate me forever. Jean Z's kisses fell crazily onto Mu Ling face and body. As he kissed, he tore off Mu Ling clothes. He cherished her so much and had never thought that he would end up in this state. The crazy tearing, crazy kisses, mixed with her bitter tears, devouring her whimpers time and time again. He tore off all her coverings and stuck close to her body. Seeing her tear-filled and dazed appearance, he wished he could just barge into her and ruthlessly stab her to wake her up. But in the end, he didn't. He lifted her chin and kissed away the tears by her eyes, forcing her to look at him clearly. Mu Ling look at me. Look at who I am. I want to marry you. Look at me clearly. Even if he forced her, he would first tell her that he would marry her. He overturned the hurtful words he had said earlier. Mu Ling I don't want any clean woman. I only want you. Our debt has long been settled. This time, I owe you. He kept on saying, even though her softness made him extremely restless, but he still stubbornly said it clearly. Mu Ling you definitely don't know how much Jean Z cherishes you and how much he wants to marry you. But now he can't do it. This just who was the one who forced who. This just who was the one who owed who. Mu Ling Did Jinzi owe you a debt in his past life? Or did he owe Gu a debt? Why did he have to be tortured like this? Mu Ling. Did you hear that? Mu Ling. Look at who I am clearly. Jinzi was still saying. But Mu Ling suddenly pressed his head down and took the initiative to kiss his lips. She had never been like this before. She was extremely clumsy, but with just 2 or 3 moves, she had easily provoked all of his impulses, making him unable to endure it any longer. The restlessness was driving him crazy. However, even at this point, he still endured it. Just like a child, stubbornly demanding an answer from her. He pushed her away and asked loudly, "Do you remember what I said?" Mu Ling held his face and choked out, "Jinzi, say that again. I want to listen to it again." Goldie was stunned. He had so stubbornly wanted an answer, but when she asked so soberly, he was caught off guard. He looked at her and was speechless for a long time. She waited quietly. You can't love, but you can be loved. As long as someone was willing, as long as someone didn't mind that she used to love like that. Goldie, as long as you don't suffer, I'll accept it. Mu Ling said from the bottom of her heart. At this moment, thousands of words, including the word marry, were all turned into one sentence. Goldie said helplessly, Mu Ling, I like you. Then he lowered his head and kissed her. He kissed all of her beauty. Her body was just like her. So good. When he hardened his heart and penetrated her, she said, Goldie, I'm sorry. She didn't know if he had heard her or if he had understood what she meant. He stopped on top of her and resisted the urge. He used his kiss to soothe the pain of her first time. When her body stopped trembling, he began his journey. He conquered the highest point again and again, wishing that he could penetrate her soul and see if his name was there. When he lost all his strength and laid completely on top of her, the whole world seemed to have quieted down. One thought to heaven, one thought to hell. One thought to stay together, one thought to part forever. One thought to love, one thought to pain. Who would be consigned to eternal damnation with a single thought? Whose one wrong thought was whose eternal life? The thought before dawn was to never meet again. The thought after dawn was to marry you. In this world, the most difficult thing to repay was love. If it wasn't about love, persistence, the past, or the future, could he be happier? Seeing that she was in pain and giving up, that was love. Seeing that she was in pain and giving in, that was also love. Love was never about first or second, only about length. After a long period of silence, Jinzi finally spoke up. Mu Ling, is this a dream or not? No. Mu Ling was very sure. Why? Goldie asked. Because I've never dreamed of you, Mu Ling said honestly. Goldie was calm. That might be in my dreams. He always dreams of you. You've had such a dream? Mu Ling asked seriously. Jinzi stared blankly for a moment before laughing out loud. That's not true. Mu Ling heaved a sigh of relief. He suddenly asked gently, Does it still hurt? She blushed and turned her head away. After a while, she said, It doesn't hurt anymore. He was silent. She immediately said, You're already sick. Why? She couldn't continue, so he immediately continued, It's all thanks to your medicine. Both of them seemed to be afraid of each other's silence. She hesitated and asked, Goldie, we're like this. Will we have a child? Do you want a child? Goldie asked. Yes. Mu Ling had always been honest. When she saw that Sister Jing was pregnant, she wanted a child. Whose child do you want? Goldie asked again. Mu Ling hesitated. Back in Tiger's prison, she had always pestered Sister Jing with questions. She wanted Chi brother's child. She had thought about it several times. Before Mu Ling could reply, Goldie asked with a smile, Goose? I'm sorry, but from today onwards you won't have the chance anymore. Mu Ling had been looking away, but when she heard Goldie's words, she looked over and stared straight into his eyes. Goldie's smile froze. In the end, he avoided her gaze instead. He moved away from her and resumed his usual coldness. He said, Mu Ling, no matter who you like, there's no turning back for you. Mu Ling didn't say anything. She kept looking at him. She only regained her senses after he finished dressing and went out. The herders had been scared away by the beasts. They didn't know where they were hiding. They stayed here for 5 days. Mu Linger brewed medicine for Goldie on time for 3 consecutive days. Goldie's health was good to begin with, so he recovered very quickly. They didn't do anything. During the day, they stayed in their own tents. At night, he would always come to find her and hug her to sleep. However, he didn't bully her anymore. On the 6th day, seeing that Goldie had fully recovered, Mu Linger said, "I want to go back to the snow mountain to wait for you, Hughie." Goldie didn't say anything. He summoned the big white tiger to bring her back from the back of the mountain. He left some silver and took away the bed of lamb fur. The 2 of them stayed on the snow mountain. Neither of them mentioned Gu again. They didn't talk about whether they liked him or not. He had thought that she would be very quiet, and she had thought that he would be very cold. However, for some reason, the 2 of them would quarrel at the slightest provocation and cause trouble at the slightest provocation. However, no matter how fiercely they quarreled or how many questions they asked, both of them were very conscious and didn't touch on the word love. He took care of all 3 meals a day, including washing the dishes. Even if the ingredients were limited, every meal could be changed. While she was studying the snow jade grass, he would hang out with a group of tigers. Occasionally, he would find wild game on the snow mountain for her. He would boil a bowl of hot soup and bring it to her, forcing her to stop what she was doing and drink it all. She had been looking forward to spring, looking forward to the arrival of Hughie. However, gradually, she hoped that this cold winter could last a little longer. It turned out that one could be very happy even if one didn't care about true love. It turned out that one could live well with someone bickering and making one angry every day. Spring still arrived. Groups of Hughie arrived as scheduled. Mu Linger was stunned as she hid in the house. "So beautiful! So beautiful!" Goldie walked closer and stood behind her for a long time. Suddenly, he hugged her. She was slightly stunned, but quickly got over it. Other than sleeping at night, he would never touch her during the day. Even at night, he would only hug her. After that time, he didn't force her again. What was wrong with him today? Actually, she was already used to being hugged by him every night. Mu Linger's attention returned to Hughie. However, she heard Goldie's gentle voice in her ear. "Linger, Hughie will be the matchmaker. Will you marry me?" He took out a gold card. Mu Linger thought it was her own card at first glance, but she knew it wasn't. He said, "This is my only gold card. It's a betrothal gift. It's not much, but you can get it in advance from Kangon Bank. I'm willing to repay your debt for the rest of my life." His name was Goldie. Even his betrothal gift was so tacky. However, Mu Linger was so touched that she wanted to cry. Were the 2 of them destined to never be able to repay each other's debt in this lifetime? Mu Linger accepted the gold card. "I'll marry you." After the snow melted, Goldie and Mu Linger went down the mountain and returned to the northernly barracks. Goldie prepared a grand wedding for Mu Linger. Tang Li kept his promise and gave a generous dowry for Mu Linger. Han Yunxi also prepared a dowry for Mu Linger as a princess. Goldie personally wrote the invitation and did not leave out Gu's copy. The invitation was sent to the Medicine Ghost Valley. It was not known if the people from the Medicine Ghost Valley had sent the invitation to Gu. In short, everyone was present at the wedding 1 month later except for Gu. No one knew how Mu Linger was related to Goldie and no one dared to mention Gu. But Goldie took the initiative to ask Long Fei Yi, "Your Majesty, why is Prince Yu not here?" Long Fei Yi replied, "Other than his own wedding, he will not attend other people's wedding." When these words came out, Tang Li could not help but laugh. "Isn't that so?" He also did not appear at Grand Tutor Gu's wedding. Mu Linger suddenly turned around and looked over. This time, everyone was quiet. Goldie did not evade. "It is not that I did not invite him, but he did not give me face." Everyone was shocked, but Mu Linger said, "Chi brother is a stingy person. He gave a gift to Grand Tutor Gu but did not give me one." This time, everyone was even more shocked. Everyone avoided Gu Chishao's name, but these 2 didn't mind at all. What was going on between them? At this time, Su Donglin flew in with a long brocade box in his hand. Goldie Darren. His Highness Prince Yu sent someone to send you a congratulatory gift. Seeing that brocade box, Han Yunqi, Mu Linger, Gu Beiwei, and Qin Min all had a complicated expression. This brocade box was so familiar. Chapter 1300. The wedding gift that Gu gave to Jin Zi and Ling was a brocade box. Han Yunqi and the rest recognized this brocade box because it was exactly the same as the one that Gu had given to Gu Beiwei at his wedding. Han Yunqi and Mu Linger had peeked inside the box. As the recipient, Gu Beiwei had naturally seen it. As for Qin Min, when she was living in Yuning, there were no servants in the Grand Tutor's residence. She had personally helped Gu Beiwei tidy up the house a few times and had seen this gift box. Driven by curiosity, she had also peeked inside. Tang Li and Ning Jing were very curious. One must know that Gu's gift was definitely not ordinary. Long Fei Yi was not interested in Gu's gift and his thoughts were not on the wedding banquet. He had been waiting for Ning Cheng's gift. He was here for the person who stood him up. Although Jin Zi did not give Ning Cheng an invitation on the surface, no one knew if he had secretly invited Ning Cheng. Ning Cheng and Jin Zi could be said to have been friends since childhood. Would Ning Cheng not come to Jin Zi's wedding? In any case, even if Ning Cheng didn't come, he should have sent a gift, right? As long as he caught the person who sent the gift, Long Fei Yi would have many ways to find Ning Cheng. He did not care if Ning Cheng stayed or left. He had to fulfill the promise that he had made to him. Jin Zi received the gift and said coldly, "I will have to trouble Imperial bodyguard Su to thank His Highness Prince Yu on behalf of us." As he spoke, he was about to open the brocade box in front of everyone. "Don't open it," Han Yunqi and Mu Ling said at the same time. Gu Beiwei was as calm as ever, as if he had never received the same gift and did not know what was inside. Qin Min did not say anything and just looked on. The two of them could be considered to have calmed down at the same time. "Why?" Jin Zi asked suspiciously. Because Mu Linger spoke for a while but couldn't come up with a reason. Fortunately, Han Yunqi was quick-witted and she hurriedly explained, "The wedding is not over yet. Why are you in such a hurry to open the gift? Hurry and send the bride to the bridal chamber. If the auspicious time is missed, it would not be good." Unfortunately, this excuse could not convince Jin Zi and instead aroused his curiosity. If it was anything else, Jin Zi wouldn't pay much attention to it, but he really wanted to take a look at Gu Qishao's gift. Therefore, he ignored Han Yunqi and Ling and suddenly opened the brocade box. At this moment, Mu Ling closed her eyes. Han Yunqi was speechless and Gu Beiwei pulled the corners of his mouth, faintly embarrassed. Qin Min secretly glanced at Gu Beiwei and decided to continue acting dumb. Jin Zi stared at the brocade box with a complicated expression and did not speak for a long time. The wedding was grand and the wedding banquet was grand. There were 3 banquets on the prairie and countless bonfires. However, there were only the few of them in this tent. The bustling outside turned the night in the prairie into a sleepless night. However, Jin Zi's silence made the tent exceptionally quiet. Mu Ling-er's ears started to turn red. She scolded Jin Zi in her heart. "What are you looking at? Haven't you seen enough after looking at it for so long? Why aren't you closing the lid? Can't you just act as if nothing happened?" Unexpectedly, Jin Zi suddenly turned to look at her and casually handed the box over. "Mu Ling-er, this is not a wedding gift. It's from Gu." "Ah!" Mu Ling-er blurted out in shock and her entire face instantly turned red. What was Qi brother doing? Causing trouble? Han Yunqi held her forehead with one hand. She did not know what to say to Jin Zi. Gu was messing around. Could it be that Jin Zi was going to mess around too? If he wanted to show that kind of thing to Ling-er, he would have to hide in the bridal chamber. Where would Ling-er put her face in front of everyone? Jin Zi handed the box over to Mu Ling-er with both hands. Jin Zi was too tall and Mu Ling-er was too short. Even though the box was in front of her, she still could not see it. Of course, she did not dare to look. She hurriedly closed the brocade box before accepting it. "Aren't you going to open it and take a look?" Jin Zi asked coldly. Mu Ling-er was angry. What did this guy want? She was about to fly into a rage when Jinzi said indifferently, I've prepared a dowry for you. Although it's late, you should still open it and take a look. When he said this, everyone was shocked. Mu Ling-er could not help but stare with her mouth agape. Dowry? How? Mu Ling-er hurriedly opened the brocade box and saw a letter lying in the brocade box. There were 2 big words written on the envelope, dowry. This was Chi brother's handwriting. She could recognize it at a glance. She took out the letter and saw a small medicine bottle lying quietly in the brocade box. She was very, very familiar with this small medicine bottle. This small medicine bottle was given to him when she gave him the life-saving medicinal pills. She lied to him and said that there were life-saving medicinal pills hidden in it and that he should only open it when he was in a life-and-death situation. In fact, this small medicine bottle not only hid her most precious pills, but also her confession note. At that time, she had childishly hoped that Chi brother would be able to understand her feelings while he was still alive. Now that she thought about it, Mu Ling-er wanted to laugh. Why was she so stupid back then? Chi brother was such a smart person. How could he not see through her? Did he return the small medicine bottle to her? Did he even look at what was inside? What kind of dowry was this? Was he going to give her a clear rejection on her wedding day? Besides Mu Ling-er, no one else present knew that this small medicine bottle originally belonged to Mu Ling-er. Jinzi said indifferently, Did he give you medicine? Mu Ling-er looked up and her eyes met Jinzi's beautiful eyes. His eyes were filled with seriousness and curiosity. She could see through his persistence at a glance. She knew that he wanted to know what was in the bottle. The look in his eyes made her heart ache uncontrollably. She didn't want to open it or explain. She didn't want Jinzi to see it. She didn't know how to answer in front of so many people. She didn't want to embarrass him. Her heart ached. Just as she was at a loss, Jinzi suddenly took the small medicine bottle and opened it. At this moment, Mu Ling-er's tears were about to fall. But she saw Jinzi pour out a pile of golden sand from the bottle. There were no pills or confession notes, but a bottle full of golden sand. Extremely precious and priceless golden sand. It was even exquisite, soft, pure, and resplendent. Under the light of the lanterns, it shimmered with a faint golden glow, making it incomparably luxurious and beautiful. Now this was gold, the purest form of gold in all of Cloud Realm continent. Jinzi. Mu Ling-er blurted out in shock. Jinzi was surprised as well. As soon as Mu Ling-er said Jinzi, he looked up and realized she was talking about the golden sand in his hands. Jinzi disdained Gu as a person, so he disdained Gu's gifts as well. But looking at the golden sand in his hands, he couldn't help but admire it. Not to mention his sincerity, it was really not easy to find an entire bottle of it. The crowd was surprised to see Jinzi's hands full of gold as well. Han Yunqi couldn't help but laugh. Ling-er, do you like your Chi brother's dowry? Before Mu Ling-er could answer, Tang Li kicked up a fuss. Ling-er, do you like your Chi brother's gold? As soon as he finished speaking, Ning Jing viciously stomped on Tang Li's foot. Would this fellow die if he didn't open his mouth? Ning Jing had almost gone crazy from Mu Ling-er's pestering back in Tiger's prison. She knew very well how Mu Ling-er used to feel for Gu. If Ling-er still hadn't given up, then Tang Li's words were like rubbing salt on her wound. Tang Li felt the pain from the stomp and didn't dare to make another sound. Unexpectedly, Jinzi asked, Mu Ling-er, do you like it? Mu Ling-er looked at him without replying. Immediately, the atmosphere grew tense again. The adults were all scared witless, especially Han Yunqi. She still didn't know why Ling-er was getting married. She was truly afraid of this foolish, impulsive girl. She was afraid that she'd get married on impulse. Afraid that Gu's gift would make her impulsive again and ruin the wedding. Love could be a matter of one person, could be impulsive. However, marriage could only be a matter of two people. Impulsiveness would hurt. Mu Ling-er was really quiet for a long time. She seemed to be sitting on an important decision that needed to be considered very carefully. After such a long time, not only was Han Yunqi anxious, but everyone else was also nervous. Ning Jing gave Han Yunqi a few glances, but Han Yunxi couldn't do anything. Ning Jing was annoyed and stepped on Tang Li even harder. Who asked him to talk too much? Who asked him so bluntly? Who asked him to make things difficult for Ling Er? Who asked him to give Jinzi a chance to ask Ling Er like that? Tang Li endured the pain and couldn't wait for Mu Ling Er to speak quickly. If Mu Ling Er didn't speak, Ning Jing wouldn't let go of his foot. Everyone was anxious, but Jinzi was very calm. He slowly put the golden sand into the small medicine bottle and waited patiently. If Mu Ling Er was willing to seriously think about this problem, even at the wedding, he could still wait patiently. Wait for her to think it through, wait for her to think it through. After putting the golden sand back into the bottle, Jinzi hesitated and simply opened the letter in front of everyone. When he opened it, he realized that the letter was actually for him. There was only one sentence in the letter, but Jinzi looked at it for a long time. The sentence was, Jinzi, my sister is honest, stupid, and ignorant of the world. I hope you can forgive and love her. I am very grateful. The signature was, Brother, Gu. Jinzi was stunned for a long time before he recovered. He didn't know why, but his heart suddenly felt very uncomfortable. Previously, no matter how much Mu Ling Er hurt him, he had never felt so uncomfortable. To be exact, it was heartache. This letter was so warm, but at the same time it was also extremely cruel. This warm request meant that Mu Ling Er was completely rejected by Gu. Looking at Mu Ling Er, his heart actually ached more than his heart ached. This poor thing was rejected and abandoned. However, he still forced a smile. Just like before, he laughed without a care in the world. He presented the letter to her and said jokingly, Mu Ling Er, look, Gu really doesn't want you anymore. You can follow me from now on. I'm still willing to take you in. The people around them couldn't see what was written on the letter, but when they heard Jinzi's words, they all frowned, including Long Fei Yi. How much did he like her that he was willing to force her? Mu Ling Er looked at Gu's handwriting. As she looked, tears fell. She looked up at Jinzi and muttered, Jinzi, don't force yourself, okay? No. Jinzi decisively interrupted her fiercely. But, Mu Ling Er seemed to be frightened and cried even harder. But Chi brother didn't want me 2 years ago. I don't want him anymore. Jinzi was stunned. Chapter 1301. Mu Ling Er didn't want Gu? 2 years ago, Gu had left without saying goodbye. Later, at Rui Er's first birthday party, Gu had appeared again. He had lost the bet to Mu Ling Er. Could it be that he hadn't kissed Mu Ling Er? No one could have imagined that the words "don't want Chi brother" would come out of Mu Ling Er's mouth. How much courage and determination did this require? After all, this little girl had been chasing Gu for more than 10 years. How much pain did she have to endure before saying these words? It was said that those who were abandoned were the most painful. In fact, many times, those who chose to give up were far more painful than those who were abandoned. To Gu, there was no such thing as giving up. If he had never wanted her, how could he give up? If he had never admitted it, how could he be given up? However, to Mu Ling Er, at the same time that she was given up, she also chose to give up. Mu Ling Er couldn't stop crying once she started crying. She said, Jinzi, I think I like you. Be happy. Don't force yourself. Okay? How long had Jinzi been waiting for this sentence? How long had Mu Ling Er been thinking about this question? At this moment, everyone seemed to have seen a grown-up Ling Er. One had to know that she hadn't chosen Jinzi at the most painful time. She had been in pain for 2 years. Even at the wedding, she was still thinking in pain. She didn't compromise. She didn't compromise with Jinzi to heal her wounds. It was said that the only person who could heal a love wound was another lover. However, Ling Er said that she didn't want Chi brother anymore 2 years ago. Her love wound had stopped 2 years ago. All the pain she felt when facing Jinzi might not have anything to do with Gu, but only with herself. It was related to whether she could still love, whether she was willing to love, and whether she dared to love. Jinzi frowned as he looked at Mu Ling Er, who was crying harder and harder. Suddenly, he pulled her over and kissed her fiercely. No answer was as real, direct, and convincing as kissing her. A fierce kiss, passionate and wild, selfless and affectionate. Mu Linger unconsciously responded to Jin Zi. This was the first time she was so unburdened. She wholeheartedly immersed herself in his aura and everything about him. This was also the first time she felt so close to this man. There was no longer a sense of distance between them, nor would he suddenly give up on her. Goldie, you didn't give up on me. That's the greatest mercy that I, Mu Ling have received in my life. Han Yunqi and the others exchanged glances and quietly retreated. Rui and Tang Tang were staring at Tang Li's feet that were stepped on by Ning Jing. As soon as Ning Jing let go of Tang Li, the two little guys looked away. Little Tang Tang was more than 3 years old. She was very pretty and looked like a porcelain doll. She said softly, "See, my mother is much fiercer than my father. My mother has the final say in our family." Rui was more than 2 years old. He looked more and more like Long Fei Yi. His eyes were lively, and there was an innate air of nobility between his brows. He didn't say anything. He patted his hands and knees seriously and stood up. His expression and actions were just like a little adult. He was clearly a year younger than Tang Tang, but he was more mature than Tang Tang. He was like Tang Tang's older brother. However, as soon as he stood up, he saw Jin Zi and Mu Linger kissing. In an instant, all of his mature facade was shattered, and a perplexed expression appeared on his immature face. He was very curious and muttered, "What are they doing?" When Tang Tang saw this, she immediately screamed and hurriedly covered her brother's eyes. "Shame! Don't look!" Only then did the adults remember the two children playing at the side. Han Yunqi and Tang Li couldn't help but laugh. Long Fei Yi immediately carried Rui and strode away. Ning Jing covered Tang Tang's eyes and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "You already know how to be shy. What are you still looking at?" "Yes." Tang Tang covered her brother's eyes while she stared at the two shy adults. Everyone went out. Lil Thing suddenly fell from the beam. Couldn't stop laughing and rolling on the ground. Another embarrassing incident for the little master. Every time it saw little master embarrass himself, it was like seeing Long Dada embarrass himself when he was young. It was simply too happy. With little master's temperament now, his temper would definitely be similar to Long Dada's in the future. When that time came, if someone could tell little master these embarrassing incidents when he was young, how would little master react? Lil Thing looked back and saw that Miss Linger and Jin Zi were kissing too intensely. Couldn't help but shudder and hurriedly ran out. It immediately jumped onto young master's shoulder. It inadvertently glanced at Qin Min beside young master, but there was no hostility. It didn't know the relationship between young master and Qin Min. It only knew that young master wasn't with Qin Min on the day of his wedding. Young master and Qin Min had been acting all along. On the way from Yuning to the northernly military camp, young master and Qin Min were in the same carriage, but the distance between them was very far. Their words and actions were very polite and improper. No matter how tired young master was, he didn't lie down in the carriage during the journey. Qin Min was the same. She always leaned on the bed and dozed off. Even if there was a high pillow beside her, she didn't casually lean on it. Lil Thing jumped a few times on young master's shoulder and jumped onto Qin Min's shoulder. Qin Min tilted her head and gently scratched Lil Thing's chin. Lil Thing enjoyed it and intimately rubbed against her hand. Lil Thing liked Qin Min very much because she was so obedient. Jin Zi's subordinates arranged a new tent for Long Fei Yi and the others to continue the banquet. Normally, Jin Zi, the bridegroom, should come out to entertain everyone. Moreover, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi, the two masters, were still at the banquet, so Jin Zi couldn't leave. However, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi didn't say anything, so the people below didn't dare to care about the rules. As for those who wanted to disturb the bridal chamber, they didn't dare to take the initiative to make trouble when they saw that Jin Zi stood the emperor and empress up and didn't come to serve them personally. At night, the wedding banquet was still lively. Mu Ling and Jin Zi had already been sent to the bridal chamber by the matron of honor. The couple sat on the bed and continued the ceremony according to the matron of honor's instructions. The matron of honor was found by Jin Z, and this wedding ceremony was requested by Jin Z. He was a prodigal son without a family, but he couldn't wrong Mu Ling in terms of etiquette for such a big event as a wedding. He wouldn't leave her out of anything that others should have. The wedding ceremony lifted the red veil, ate the sweet soup, and drank the cross-cupped wine. The matron of honor smiled and whispered a few words to Jin Z before leaving. Jin Z personally went to send them off and locked the door. Mu Ling shy face was covered with a faint blush. Under the festive red light in the room, she looked especially dainty. But the most beautiful moment was when she raised her eyes to look at Jin Z, and that moment of shyness. Just now, she was almost suffocated by this man's kiss. Fortunately, the matron of honor interrupted them and sent them to the bridal chamber. Jin Z walked over, squatted down in front of her, and held her hands. Both of them were silent. It seemed that they were used to arguing with each other and were not used to such a sudden silence. After a long while, Jin Z said, "I won't compromise. I'm serious." Of course, Mu Ling knew what he was talking about. She said, "I'm sorry to have made you wait so long. Fortunately, it's less than 3 years," he said lightly. "Are you really not going to the mysterious continent?" She wanted to ask this for a long time. "No, it's fine. It's quite good now," he answered. "Why?" She didn't understand. "You're too stupid. You're not suitable there." He meant what he said. From Feng Ying's words, his background was definitely not simple. He could control the tiger tribe, but Feng Ying could. The people of the black tribe couldn't control them either. There must be a reason behind this. Since he was young, he had seen how constrained and helpless Ning Cheng was when he shouldered the mission. He didn't like it, and Mu Ling wasn't suitable there either. It was quite good now. Moreover, he couldn't really lose northernly after marrying Mu Ling. Wouldn't Ning Cheng hate him for the rest of his life? "You're stupider than me, okay?" Mu Ling said unhappily. Jin Z raised his eyebrows and looked at her with disdain. Mu Ling saw his gaze and frowned. "You're bullying me right after marrying me. If I'd known earlier, I wouldn't have married you for the rest of my life." Jin Z coughed lightly and said, "Mu Ling, I don't think I've done anything to you yet, right? Are you regretting it already? What else do you want to do to me?" Mu Ling was angry. It was one thing for this guy to call her stupid for no reason, but what else did he want? What did his not going to mysterious sky have to do with her being stupid? At most, he knew how to tame beasts. In terms of martial arts, they were all considered mediocre. Jin Z stood up. Mu Ling wanted to stand up as well, but before she could stand firm, she was pushed onto the couch by Jin Z. He pressed down on her and propped his hands on either side of her. He looked down at her and said very honestly, "Mu Ling, I've tolerated you for a very, very long time." Mu Ling originally thought that Jin Z was going to bully her, but when Jin Z said that, she was confused. What did he tolerate? "Hey, I haven't provoked you recently, right? What did you tolerate? Say it out loud," she asked angrily. Jin Z was instantly speechless. Mu Ling grabbed his collar and said, "Speak clearly." Jin Z really didn't want to say those words, but he had to. He said word by word, "Mu Ling, how stupid are you? Ridiculous." Mu Ling really didn't understand. Jin Z looked at her confused little face and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the end, he could only control his temper and lean down to whisper in her ear. What did he tolerate? After tasting meat, he couldn't eat the beauty in his arms every night. If he wasn't tolerating her, then what was he doing? Mu Ling was enlightened, and the redness in her ears spread to her entire face. Meanwhile, Jin Z was already nibbling on her ear and kissing it. Unlike that night in the grasslands, Jin Z was especially gentle tonight. Tonight, Mu Ling was especially awake. She carefully felt his touch and personally experienced all the questions that she had been curious about. So this was what it felt like. When Jin Z's big hand gently reached in and covered her sensitivity and softness with incomparable gentleness, she finally couldn't feel it clearly anymore. She couldn't help but cry out, unable to bear it. If that night in the grasslands was painful, uncomfortable, painful, numb, and scared. Then at this moment, she was only greedy. She was greedy for every touch and every kiss he gave her. It must be because of love that she could be so unrestrained and so beautiful. Only when he truly became one with her would he feel so close to her. Only then would he feel that he truly possessed her. Jean Z, from now on, Ling Er is yours. You have to be happy. Chapter 1302. The scenery of the grasslands at the end of spring and the beginning of summer was as beautiful as Jiangnan's. The stream gurgled, the water plants were plump, the grass was long, and the orioles were flying. The meadow was full of small flowers of various colors. Although it was unknown, there were large patches of them. Regardless of whether it was close up or from afar, they were very beautiful. The entire land seemed to be covered with a carpet of flowers. Walking on the grasslands in spring and galloping horses were as beautiful as Jiangnan's flowers and poems. Unfortunately, Han Yunxi was pregnant and could only sit in a carriage. Long Fei, the son of heaven, was actually acting as her coachman. Little Rui sat beside Long Fei Yi, looking up at the eagle circling in the sky. Little Tang Tang was in her father's arms, while Gu Beiwei and Qin Min each rode a horse, walking side by side. As for Mu Ling and Ningjing, they didn't look like women at all. They waved their whips in front and ran wildly, competing to see who would reach the front of the hill first. Han Yunqi sat behind Rui and asked with a smile, Rui, do you think your Auntie Jing or Auntie Ling will win? Rui answered without thinking, Imperial Mother, do you want to bet? Long Fei Ye's lips curled into a smile, but he didn't say anything. Bet on what? Han Yunqi asked quickly. Rui said, No. Why are you afraid of losing? Han Yunqi tried to provoke him. Rui didn't answer. You really don't dare? Your imperial father is laughing up his sleeve at you. Han Yunqi grinned. Rui didn't answer. Long Fei Yi had long been laughing. Although Rui was young, his judgment was excellent. If he could do it, he would definitely do it. If he couldn't do it, no matter how tempting or provocative he was, he wouldn't do it. When he didn't know how to answer his mother, he wouldn't say anything. If she wasn't familiar with his habits, she wouldn't know what he was thinking. Han Yunqi knew her son's temperament, so she didn't say much. She turned to look at Gu Beiwei and Qin Min. When Long Fei Yi and Rui sat together, they looked even more alike. At this moment, both father and son were looking ahead with cold and aloof expressions. They were imposing without being angry and did not put on airs. They both had their own dignity. On the other hand, Tang Li and little Tang Tang, who were not far away, were the complete opposite. The father and daughter were very excited. Dad, hurry up, charge. Mother is about to lose. Little Tang Tang shouted anxiously as she pointed to the front with both hands. Hurry up. Tang Li held his daughter with one hand and waved the whip with the other. He sped up and chased after her, saying in a low voice, With me here, your mother won't lose. Don't worry. Little Tang Tang was stunned and looked back. Why? You're wrong. With your Aunt Ling here, your mother won't lose. Tang Li laughed. Let's go. Ningjing, hurry up. Little Tang Tang immediately looked forward again. Mother, you can do it. Tang Li quickly brought little Tang Tang to Ningjing's side and ran side by side with her. Ningjing glanced at the father and daughter before continuing to look forward with all her might. Tang Li brought little Tang Tang along and followed beside her. When Tang Li said, Jing Jing, little Tang Tang shouted, Charge! When Tang Li said, Ningjing, little Tang Tang shouted again, You can do it! When Tang Li said, Madam, little Tang Tang shouted, Mother! No. Tang Li immediately corrected her. Little Tang Tang immediately corrected herself and shouted, Mother! Only the father and daughter chased after Ningjing and bombarded her with shouts. Ningjing was originally focused and pulled away from Mu Ling. However, after being disturbed by the father and daughter, she really couldn't concentrate. Gradually, Mu Ling caught up. Just as Tang Li shouted Madam passionately, Ningjing was instantly overtaken by Mu Ling and fell behind. Finally, Ning Jing couldn't take it anymore. She turned back to look at Tang Li and her daughter. When she saw the smile on Tang Li's face, Ning Jing wanted to whip him and send him flying. However, when she saw her daughter's excited expression, her heart softened and she smiled helplessly. Sometimes, Ning Jing would secretly think that it was actually quite good that she couldn't have another child. With Tang Li, the chatterbox, and Tang Tang, the little chatterbox, if there was another one, she would definitely break down. She didn't turn back and continued to chase with all her might. However, she was already very close to the finish line, but she didn't catch up. Mu Ling was first and she was second. Little Tang Tang was a little disappointed, but Tang Li carried her and chased after them, laughing loudly. Ning Jing, you're second, your daughter and I are last. Little Tang Tang was stunned, but she quickly got up and stood on the horse's back. She turned back and smiled at Ruer and the rest who were about to come over. They're last. In this kind of competition, would Long Fei Yi be last if he took it seriously? Impossible. What about Gu Beiyue? Gu Beiyue could take first place even if he didn't ride a horse. Looking at her daughter from head to toe and seeing her optimistic smile, Ning Jing's mouth twitched. She didn't know what her daughter would become if she continued to hang out with Tang Li. Jin Zi had arrived at the foot of the hill ahead of time. He had already set up the tent and the fire. At this time, he was setting up the iron rack and preparing to barbecue. Seeing that Mu Ling had won, Jin Zi didn't have much of a reaction. He casually threw a towel to Mu Ling and lowered his head to fiddle with his barbecue meat. Sister Ning, thank you for letting me win. Mu Ling smiled brightly. Your equestrian skills have improved a lot. Did Jin Zi teach you that? Ning Jing asked jokingly. She didn't know if it was because Mu Ling was already a married woman or something else, but Ning Jing felt that this girl looked different, but she couldn't tell what was different. Han Yunqi came over and was immediately attracted by the aroma of the barbecue meat. She was so hungry that she couldn't look away. Thinking back, she only found out that she was pregnant when she was disgusted by the barbecue meat. Now, looking at the barbecue meat, she didn't feel disgusted at all. Instead, her appetite was very good. As soon as she walked in, Gu Beiyue said from the side, "Your Highness the Empress, you can't." Han Yunqi glanced over and didn't have a chance to refute. Long Fei Yi had already grabbed her hand and said in a low voice, "Rest in the tent. You've been on the carriage for half a day. Su Donglin will send your lunch over later. Be good and listen to him. If you let Su Donglin give you special treatment again, I'll definitely chop off his hands." Although Long Fei spoke in a low voice, everyone still heard him. They all looked towards Han Yunqi, including Jin Zi, who'd been bowing his head the entire time. Han Yunqi wanted to find a hole to hide in. Ever since she was diagnosed with the pregnancy pulse and was sent back to Yuning, she had been living a non-human life. Long Fei Yi asked for a small booklet from Tang Li. It recorded all kinds of taboos and supplements. Long Fei Yi strictly followed all the rules in the booklet. Whether it was in the palace or out of the palace, there were no exceptions to her 3 meals. He said he would make it up to her. He said he would accompany her. Why did it turn out like this? However, she had to admit that this pregnancy was far less relaxed and flexible than the last time. She didn't know if it was because she was old or if she had eaten and slept too much that she had become stupid. She was only about 5 months pregnant, but her belly was very obvious and very big. When she walked, she would unconsciously use her hand to support her waist. "Sister, I'll go in with you." Ling quickly came over to support her. However, Jin Zi suddenly asked, "Grand Tutor Gu, other than barbecued food, what else can't you eat when you're pregnant?" Mu Ling was shocked and instinctively looked at her flat belly. Although she didn't eat much barbecued food, she liked other things, such as fried, braised, or barbecued food. She especially liked spicy food. When she was making medicine, if she didn't eat until she was full, she wouldn't be able to concentrate. Gu Beiyue said indifferently, fried, braised, and barbecued food. It's best to have a light taste, less sour and less spicy. Jin Zi nodded and didn't say anything. However, Mu Ling felt uncomfortable all over. After Jin Zi tormented her last night, She even told him that she hoped that the baby would come quickly. Now, it seemed that she had to seriously consider it. When Ningjing saw Mu Ling-er's expression and recalled what she said in Tiger's prison, she couldn't help but want to laugh. She also went over to support Han Yunxi. They were about to enter when Han Yunxi turned around and looked. Qin Min, come over and rest. Don't just stand there. After Qin Min dismounted, she stood beside Gu Beiyue and was especially quiet. Yes, Your Majesty. She curtsied. Her polite manner was exactly the same as Gu Beiyue's. On the way from Yuning to Bailey, Han Yunxi spoke a few times, but in the end, she was too lazy to continue. The women had all entered the tent to chat, so it wasn't appropriate for Long Fei and the rest of the men to enter. Tang Li moved to Jin Zi's side and learned how to barbecue meat from him. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue sat at the side, watching and whispering. As for Rui'er and Tang Tang, they had already chased the little thing far away. As Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue chatted, they looked up at the snowy mountains in the west and asked indifferently, Lord Jean, how about we flatten Wintercrow's slave camp next year? In Wintercrow, from the nobles to the slave traders, there were slave camps that imprisoned countless slaves. The prison of the slave camp was the beginning of Jin Zi's memories in this life. Jin Zi's hand stiffened slightly, but he quickly continued to flip the meat. He said, How many men will Your Majesty give this humble subject? How many do you want? Long Fei Yi asked. Jin Zi finally looked up and said seriously, I'll report after I think it through. In the tent, Han Yunxi, Mu Ling-er, and Ningjing were all sitting lazily. Only Qin Min sat upright, her back straight like a well-bred young lady. Han Yunxi and Mu Ling-er had just finished telling Ningjing about Qin Min's legs being poisoned. As for Qin Min's miscarriage, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi still pretended not to know anything. Now, everyone thought that Qin Min had lost her child and was recuperating. They also knew that she and Gu Beiyue had adopted a foster son in Ningzhou City, whose nickname was Shadow. Han Yunxi originally thought that Qin Min would become familiar with everyone after sitting for a while, but who knew that Qin Min would sit quietly without saying a word? The three of them chatted and laughed. Qin Min would laugh with them, but she didn't interrupt. Finally, Han Yunxi couldn't help but raise her brows and look at Qin Min. Mu Ling-er wanted to speak, but Ningjing stopped her with a look. Han Yunxi looked at Qin Min with interest. Qin Min didn't panic, but she was a little uncomfortable. She asked, Your Majesty the Empress, is there something on my face? Han Yunxi shook her head and didn't say anything. Qin Min was suspicious. Your Majesty the Empress has something to say to me? Han Yunxi shook her head again. Qin Min couldn't help but laugh and asked directly, Then why is Your Majesty the Empress looking at me? Han Yunxi said, Qin Min, why is it that the more I look at you, the more I feel like you resemble Gu Beiyue? Chapter 1303. Qin Min didn't expect Han Yunxi to say that. She felt that Han Yunxi's words seemed to have a hidden meaning. However, she didn't think too much about it and continued to play dumb. Actually, she didn't want to pretend either. She couldn't wait to lie down on the couch and have a good sleep. She was so tired that every bone in her body felt uncomfortable from sitting in the carriage. Although she had slept in the tent for the past few days, she couldn't get enough sleep. Helplessly, she had to be alert at all times, just like the days when she lived in Yuning City. She was afraid that if she got familiar with the Empress and the rest, she would easily give herself away. Mu Ling-er was fine, but the Empress and Ningjing weren't easy to deal with. They had sharp eyes. She had already ruined Gu Beiyue's plan because of the child. If her relationship with Gu Beiyue and her marriage were to be messed up again, she wouldn't be able to face Gu Beiyue in her next life. She still missed the days in Yuning City. She had been away for so long, and she didn't know how Little Shadow was doing. She originally wanted to bring Little Shadow here, but after thinking carefully for a long time, she gave up. If she was so uncomfortable, it wouldn't be convenient for Little Shadow to come. She couldn't let the child suffer. Do they look alike? Qin Min asked curiously. They don't look alike, but their tempers are exactly the same. Mu Ling-er couldn't help but say, Sister Min, tell us secretly. Did Gu Beiwe set the rules for you? You're not allowed to do that at home, and you're not allowed to do that when you go out? Qin Min laughed. No, he's just like me. It's just that Mu Ling was easy to deal with, but the Empress and Ning Jing weren't. She answered while thinking about how to change the topic. In the end, she pretended to be shy and whispered, "It's just that I'm not allowed to eat anything." You're not pregnant, so why can't you eat anything? Mu Ling asked again. Qin Min said faintly, I'm still recuperating. He's watching me closely, afraid that I'll be careless again. Only then did Mu Ling remember that Qin Min had a miscarriage. She immediately corrected herself. Sister Min, Gu Beiwe's heart aches for you, and that's why he's watching over you. Look at how much my brother-in-law dotes on my sister. That's why he's also keeping a close eye on her. Mu Ling had just been quite depressed that Gu Beiwe was so talkative, causing her sister to not be able to eat barbecued meat and causing her to be banned from eating in the future. However, she knew that Qin Min did not have a miscarriage because she fell down on her own. She was afraid that Qin Min would blame herself and be unhappy if she brought up this topic, so she changed her words to comfort her. Ning Jing listened quietly. Han Yunqi knew what was going on, so she didn't say anything. Actually, you don't have to be so secretive, Qin Min said calmly. At this point, Mu Ling successfully changed the topic. Really? Mu Ling was overjoyed. Qin Min said seriously, after 3 months of pregnancy, you don't have to deliberately restrict your diet and daily activities. Sour and spicy, fried and roasted things, and if the ingredients are fresh, you don't have to ban them. It's okay to eat them occasionally to satisfy your cravings. But Gu Beiwe, Mu Ling didn't quite believe her. After all, Gu Beiwe was an authority in the medical field. Unexpectedly, Qin Min said, you have to trust a female doctor when it comes to women's matters. Mu Ling was stunned for a moment before she laughed out loud. That makes sense, that makes sense. Han Yunqi could clearly tell that Qin Min was deliberately changing the topic, but when she heard this, she felt as though she had found a soulmate. Although she wasn't an obstetrician, she knew that there was no need to be so particular about pregnancy. She just couldn't convince Long Fei Yi, and Gu Beiwe was on Long Fei Ye's side. She said teasingly, Qin Min, when you go back tonight, tell your Gu Beiwe to help me put in a good word with Long Fei Yi. Qin Min smiled. Your Majesty, this subject's wife will do her best. Mu Ling pursed her lips into a soundless smile, as if she could see her future days of eating, eating, and eating. Ning Jing was about to speak, but Qin Min hurriedly spoke first. She said to Han Yunqi, Your Majesty, may this subject take your pulse? Han Yunqi immediately reached out her hand. She'd heard Gu Beiwe say that Qin Min was a medical all-rounder who was a professional in all aspects. Moreover, she had her own set of acupuncture techniques that could cure many illnesses that couldn't be cured with medicine or took too long to heal themselves. Instead, her acupuncture techniques could cure them quickly. She just wanted to let Qin Min take her pulse and see if there was any difference between what Qin Min said and what Gu Beiwe said. Normally, Gu Beiwe would take her pulse every few days and give her a simple checkup while telling her things to take note of. However, this time, Qin Min took her pulse for a long time. At first, Han Yunqi was still calm, but when she saw Qin Min's cautious expression and silence, she began to feel uneasy. My sister, what's wrong? Mu Ling couldn't help but ask. Qin Min remained silent. After a while, she replied, It's nothing serious. As she spoke, she suddenly approached Han Yunqi, and Han Yunqi whispered something. Han Yunqi looked incredulous. Really? Your Majesty, we can verify it in about 5 months. Qin Min respectfully returned to her seat. You? Han Yunqi was very surprised. Qin Min only smiled and didn't explain. Ning Jing and Mu Ling were confused. Mu Ling panicked. What are you whispering about? Han Yunqi said, I'm pregnant with a girl? Ah! Mu Ling was shocked. Ning Jing was also extremely shocked. Qin Min, you can even tell. Qin Min still looked like a well-bred young lady. She sat there upright, and even the way she placed her hands was very polite. She smiled faintly, and the feeling she gave people was so beautiful. She wasn't stiff or pretentious at all. That warm and sweet smile made people unconsciously think of the sunlight outside the tent. It was warm but not hot, bright but not dazzling. It was April, and the spring sun was warm outside the tent. The spring breeze was gentle, and the spring scenery was beautiful. Qin Min said with a smile, "Your Majesty, Madam Jing, Madam Ling, Qin Min is willing to make a bet with you." No one had ever made a bet with Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi didn't want to win. She only wanted to lose. She wanted to lose so badly. Long Fei, you wanted a daughter so much. Wasn't she the same? Bet, Qin Min, if you win. Han Yunxi thought for a very long time, but she was unable to think of any conditions. She asked, "What do you want?" Qin Min had been overjoyed the entire time. She was completely confident that the Empress was pregnant with a girl. The reason why she said it was purely to divert the Empress' attention and change the topic. However, she became serious when she heard the Empress say that. "Your Majesty, I have a request. I hope the Empress won't tell Beiyue." "Go ahead." Han Yunxi even wanted to replace Gu Beiyue and have Qin Min stay in the palace to do regular checkups for her. "Your Majesty, if I'm right, please let Beiyue rest well. I hope the Empress can let Beiyue recuperate more. He's a medicine pot, so he can't tire himself out too much," Qin Min said seriously. Last time when Gu Beiyue left the Ning province, she had taken Gu Beiyue's pulse. Gu Beiyue's body was actually extremely weak. Although she had not completely understood what was wrong with him, she knew that what he needed the most was rest. She also did not know whether he would soak in medicinal soup often after leaving the Ning province. His illness could not be delayed. The longer it was delayed, the worse it would get. He said it could be cured and that it would be fine, so she obviously believed him. However, she was afraid that he would be busy, afraid that he would drag it out, afraid that he would not cherish himself. He was the grand tutor of the crown prince. He was not just teaching a child, but the heir apparent of the great Qin, the person who would protect the great Qin in the future. He was also the head of the Imperial Academy of Medicine and Medical City. From the nobles to the commoners, he was responsible for the heavy responsibility of the great Qin's medical treatment. All matters related to human lives fell on his shoulders. He was also the emperor's internal advisor. He secretly controlled a group of strategists to share the emperor's burdens and solve his problems. He did his best for the great Qin. Although she did not know the real reason why he adopted Little Shadow, she knew that he wanted to have an heir, and it was related to the Shadow clan. He was also the only descendant of the Shadow clan. He had endless things to do. With his personality, why would he take the initiative to take a leave? Ning Jing and Mu Ling also knew that other than Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiyue was the busiest. They only thought that Qin Min was complaining that Gu Beiyue did not have enough time to accompany her. Han Yunxi, on the other hand, realized that Gu Beiyue needed to rest. Han Yunxi knew that Gu Beiyue was a medicine bottle. "Okay." Han Yunxi agreed immediately. However, she secretly thought that when she returned, she would find a reason to give Gu Beiyue a leave. Whether Qin Min won the bet or not, she had to do it. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi stayed on the grasslands for a few days. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue personally made a trip to Wintercrow. When they returned, they had a secret conversation with Jin Zi for an entire day. Long Fei Yi had made up his mind to take over Wintercrow's grasslands. He was just waiting for an opportunity. Although Han Yunxi was in charge of military affairs, Long Fei Yi did not let her worry too much during her pregnancy. She also did not ask much about Wintercrow. Instead, she asked about Yao City. Although Mu Linger was married, she was still concerned about the medicine administration. On the day that Han Yunxi and the others returned to Qicheng Yuning, she had Jin Zi accompany her back to the Mu residence. Han Yunxi originally planned to discuss with Long Fei Yi on the way to give Gu Beiyue a leave of absence. Who knew that after traveling with them for a day, Gu Beiyue and Qin Min suddenly received a secret letter from Medical City's vice head Shin. Medical City's Qin family and Ren family had quarreled over a patient. Vice head Shin could not handle it and asked Gu Beiyue to hurry back as soon as possible. "Your Majesty, Qin Min will go back with you, Gu Beiwei said seriously. No need. We'll take the official road. We can find a doctor along the way. Han Yunxi refused. Gu Beiwei simply wanted to leave Qin Min behind to take care of her. She was pregnant. She was not weak to the point where she needed a doctor to be on standby. If news of this got out, she would definitely become a laughingstock. Instead, it was Gu Beiwei. Since he was busy, having a woman to take care of him was better than nothing. Your Majesty. As soon as Gu Beiwei said that, Qin Min, who had been very quiet the entire time, interrupted him. She said, Beiwei, it's about time we dealt with the matter of the Qin family. This might be an opportunity. Exactly. Han Yunxi was about to mention this as well. Mu Ling-er had already returned to Medicine City. Now that the great Qin's treasury was filled and the imperial might was awe-inspiring, it was time to break the monopolization of medicine by the two major clans in Medical City and Medical City. It's time. Long Fei Yi nodded as well. Gu Beiwei glanced at Qin Min, but he said nothing more. Qin Min met his gaze and looked away in a hurry. She could not help but panic from her originally calm heart. She regretted it. When the carriage arrived at a fork in the road, it was already late at night. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had to head due south, while Gu Beiwei and Qin Min had to head southwest. After watching Long Fei Yi's carriage leave, Gu Beiwei turned around and said indifferently, First, Miss Qin, you must be tired from the past few days, right? Don't worry and sleep. I'll drive the carriage myself. Qin Min had already boarded the carriage and pulled down the curtains, but she still could not help herself in the end. She said softly, Principal Beiwei, there won't be a next time. Promise. She had said too much earlier. Chapter 1304. Hearing Qin Min's words, Gu Beiwei's quiet face showed some helplessness. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he only sighed softly and waved the whip to drive the carriage. Qin Min did not hear Gu Beiwei's sigh. She did not wait for a reply and did not know if Gu Beiwei heard her and accepted her apology and promise, or if he did not hear her. She wanted to say it again, but on second thought, the surroundings were so quiet and her voice was not soft. The two of them were separated by a curtain, so there was no reason for him not to hear it. She quietly sat back in the car and didn't say anything else. Finally, she was left alone in the carriage. She could sit and lie as comfortably as she wanted. However, she only lazily lay on the high pillow and did not feel sleepy at all. She lowered her head and seemed to be in a daze. No one knew what she was thinking. After a long time, she muttered, There really won't be a next time. She secretly looked out of the window. It was the wilderness outside and the night was quiet. She secretly lifted a corner of the curtain and saw Gu Beiwei's back view. The carriage was moving very fast. The wind that came from the front raised his sleeves and robes, as well as his long hair. She originally only wanted to take a look and obediently go to sleep. However, the road ahead was long and dark. She stared and stared and stared blankly. How great would it be if this path could go on and on and on and on without end? Gu Beiwei, how long is the longest road in the world? How long do you and I have in this lifetime? She was really afraid that it would be too late in a few decades. However, she did not know what she could do in time. Qin Min raised her head and looked at the bright moon in the sky. She suddenly felt very lucky. She was lucky that her legs were crippled since young and not her eyes. Otherwise, she would have missed out on so many years of moonlight. She had seen countless sceneries, but after meeting Gu Beiwei, she realized that the most beautiful scenery in the world was the moon. It was the eternal, quiet and gentle bright moon in the sky. Qin Min gently closed the curtain and leaned to the side, sleeping peacefully. The next day, when Qin Min woke up, it was already noon. The carriage drove into the county and the surroundings were bustling. She raised the curtain and found them in the street. Gu Beiwei asked as he drove, Miss Qin, did you sleep well last night? You haven't rested yet? Qin Min asked seriously. She had calculated the distance last night. They would arrive at a village early this morning, and Gu Beiwei would be able to rest. Who would have thought that he would pass through the village and rush to the county? After another sleepless night, how could his body take it? From Yuning to Northern Li, he had stayed in Northern Li for a few days. Plus, he had been on the road for the past 2 days. He hadn't soaked in medicinal soup for about a month and a half. She didn't know what kind of medicinal soup he used, but no matter what kind of prescription it was, it had to be soaked at least once a month. Soaking in the medicinal soup was not only to nourish the body, but it was also a good opportunity to rest. Both the body and the mind could be relaxed and recuperated. Medicinal therapy was not as good as food therapy, and food therapy was not as good as heart therapy. He wasn't talking about treatment, but about normal recuperation. If he was sick, the best way to treat him was to combine medical treatment with mental treatment. In Gu Beiyue's case, soaking in medicinal soup was the most suitable. The situation at Medical City is urgent, and we can't afford any delays. You can rest and eat at the inn in front. I'll go prepare some dry food. We won't be able to rest on the way, Gu Beiyue said lightly. No. Qin Min blurted out. It would take at least half a month to get to Medical City from here. Gu Beiyue was shocked and instinctively turned to look at Qin Min. In his memory, she had never spoken so loudly before. Eldest Miss Qin, is there any inconvenience? Gu Beiyue asked seriously. Qin Min originally wanted to say that she was soaking in the medicinal soup, but on second thought, Gu Beiyue would definitely find an excuse to refuse if she said that. She said, It's not convenient for me. I have to drink medicine, and that medicine will take at least 6 hours to brew. I also have to buy some things to use. Otherwise, it will be inconvenient for me on the way. Gu Beiyue frowned and asked, What's wrong? Qin Min stole a glance at him and lowered her head. She was clearly guilty, but in Gu Beiyue's eyes, she was shy. A complicated look flashed past Gu Beiyue's eyes, but he didn't continue asking. Other than his grandfather, he had never admired anyone else's medical skills. Qin Min was the first. Qin Min's complexion wasn't bad, so it shouldn't be anything serious. She should be able to deal with it herself. If he guessed correctly, it was probably something that women encountered every month. Qin Min's tactful words meant exactly that. Many women would drink some medicine to nourish themselves when it was inconvenient. She thought that this reason should be able to fool Gu Beiyue. However, to her surprise, not only did Gu Beiyue compromise, he even said, Your health is more important. Stay at the inn tonight. Take your time, there's no rush. Just one night. We can leave tomorrow morning, Qin Min hurriedly added. Once they arrived at the inn, Qin Min really wrote down a prescription and went to get the medicine. Gu Beiyue took the prescription and glanced at it. He knew what to do. He said, Eldest Miss Qin, go eat first. Leave this to this one. Then I'll have to trouble Grand Tutor Gu, Qin Min said. For a moment, Gu Beiyue wasn't used to it. If she wasn't calling him esteemed academy head, then Academy Head Beiyue. This was the first time she'd called him Grand Tutor. Qin Min smiled. Grand Tutor Gu, I hope that after this trip, there won't be a medical academy anymore, and that you'll no longer be the esteemed academy head. Gu Beiyue smiled as well. I hope eldest Miss Qin's auspicious words are fulfilled. Gu Beiyue was about to leave when Qin Min called him back. Grand Tutor Gu, you haven't had time to soak in your medicinal decoctions since leaving Tianing. Since you can't leave today, why don't you? Before she could finish, Gu Beiyue cut her off. Eldest Miss Qin, 2 guards will be arriving later. They're both reliable men. They'll escort you to Medical City. It won't be too late for you to leave after you've recovered. I'll prepare some dry rations and leave in a bit. Qin Min was stupefied. It was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over her head. She only felt a chill spread from the top of her head to her feet, then from her skin to her heart. It was so cold that she didn't know what to do. She stared blankly at Gu Beiyue, not knowing what to say. Sky Room Number 1. Gu Beiyue handed the room card to her. She reflexively reached out to take it, but he turned and left. Gu Beiyue had already disappeared, but Qin Min was still standing there in a daze. A few passers-by bumped into her a few times, but she didn't move at all. Seeing this, the innkeeper hurried over to ask, "Is this young miss staying in Sky Room number 1? This little one will take you up." It was only then that Qin Min regained her senses. She looked at the waiter and her eyes suddenly turned red. "Young miss, are you all right?" The innkeeper was frightened. The Sky Room was the best room in the entire inn. That white-robed gentleman had spent a large sum of money to reserve all the rooms, which was equivalent to the entire 3rd floor. This young miss was traveling with him, so her identity must be extraordinary. He was really afraid that he wouldn't serve her well. Qin Min stared at him blankly for a long time before she finally said, "I'm fine. I'm just hungry." "You can cry even when you're hungry?" The innkeeper was extremely curious and hurriedly comforted her. "Young miss, don't cry. What do you want to eat? This little one will immediately get the kitchen to prepare it." "Since when did I cry?" Qin Min looked serious. That's right, her eyes were just red. Since when did she cry? No, this little one's eyes are bad." The innkeeper hurriedly brought over the menu and tried to change the topic. "Young miss, what would you like to eat? Would you like to eat in the hall or this little one will send it to your room?" Qin Min looked at the menu and actually ordered a table full of dishes. "Send it to my room. I want it hot." After she finished speaking, she went upstairs. The innkeeper heaved a sigh of relief and hurriedly got the kitchen to prepare it. Soon, a table full of delicacies was placed in front of Qin Min. She took a glance and rolled up her sleeves, gorging herself on the food. Qin Min fed herself until she was full. Suddenly, she felt like she had regained her strength. She was afraid that Gu Beiwei would not be able to find her when he returned, so she left a few words with the innkeeper before leaving. She went to buy her own things and food. The moment Qin Min returned, she saw Gu Beiwei waiting for her at the door. He had changed his clothes, but he was still wearing white. He must have taken care of everything and cleaned himself up. Seeing Qin Min carrying a pile of things, Gu Beiwei strode over to help her. Qin Min threw everything to him. Just as she was about to speak, Gu Beiwei spoke first. "Eldest Miss Qin, don't go out alone in an unfamiliar place in the future. It's dangerous." She didn't know if he was thinking about the incident in the tea house in Ningzhou City, but she remembered. Thinking about his anger that day and how he had said that he would spare her life, her heart warmed. She said, "Thank you, Grand Tutor Gu. I'll remember it. I've already instructed the kitchen to boil the medicine. It will be sent to your room later," Gu Beiwei said. Qin Min nodded and asked, "Grand Tutor Gu, are you leaving?" "I'll leave when the guards arrive." Gu Beiwei put down Qin Min's things and was about to leave. Qin Min asked, "Grand Tutor Gu, are you hungry?" "I'm not hungry," he said indifferently. "I'll be right outside the door. Eldest Miss Qin, if you need anything, you can just shout." Qin Min opened the things in the package and smiled faintly. "If Grand Tutor Gu isn't hungry, let's set off. I've already prepared the food. You don't have to rest on the way." Gu Beiwei was slightly startled. Qin Min continued, "Grand Tutor Gu is seriously ill, but you're still busy with Medical City's matters. I'm just a small matter and shouldn't be delayed. If I don't return to the Qin family, Grand Tutor Gu might not be able to do anything." "It's okay if you're delayed for a day or two," Gu Beiwei advised. "No." Qin Min feels guilty and uneasy. As Qin Min spoke, she clutched her stomach and sat down, pretending to be in pain. Gu Beiwei wanted to take her pulse, but Qin Min stopped him. "It's just a small matter. It's not an illness." She stood up. "Grand Tutor Gu, let's go." Gu Beiwei frowned, but he didn't hesitate for long. He said, "Eldest Miss Qin, hurry and sit down. Drink the medicine and we'll leave tomorrow morning." At this moment, Qin Min almost jumped up. She succeeded. However, she still lowered her eyes and said seriously, "No, you can't be delayed because of me. It's fine. Your health is more important." Gu Beiwei comforted her gently. Qin Min still shook her head. "No?" A hint of helplessness flashed past Gu Beiwei's eyes, but he still smiled faintly and said, "Eldest Miss Qin, it's time for me to soak in the medicinal soup. Today's delay isn't because of you. Qin Min's eyes were full of smiles, but she didn't dare to laugh. She said, Grand Tutor Gu, can you let me take a look at the prescription? Gu Beiyue really wrote down the prescription and sent the waiter to get the herbs and boil them into a large tub. He soaked in the steaming medicinal soup and sighed heavily before raising his head and closing his eyes. He really didn't understand Qin Min's intentions at first, but when Qin Min pretended to be in pain and sat down, he understood everything. She was deliberately looking for an opportunity to make him soak in the medicinal soup. Once again, he could not help but ask himself if marrying Qin Min was the only and biggest mistake he had made in his life. Chapter 1305. Gu Beiyue was soaking in the medicinal soup. The soup was not full enough to reach his chest. He was thin but refined. His chest was firm and well-defined. Although he was a pot of medicine, he did not look sickly. Perhaps it had something to do with the fact that he had been practicing martial arts since he was young. His figure, hidden under his white clothes, was unimaginably good. He was originally looking at the ceiling in deep thought, but for some reason he fell asleep unknowingly. If it were any other time, he would have buried his head in a pile of letters. If he was not busy, he would have stayed up late for another 2 to 4 hours. He would not sleep, nor could he sleep. He clearly did not relax, but the steam from the medicinal soup and the smell of the herbs made his body slowly relax. Gradually, his heart also relaxed. In this familiar temperature and smell, everything seemed to become familiar. He seemed to have returned to the time when he was young and soaked in medicinal soup every day. His body and mind did not regress to that time. Instead, he was like a bystander watching the child soak in the medicinal soup gradually become a teenager and gradually grow up. His gentle eyes unconsciously revealed a look of pity. He had pitied countless people, but this was the first time he pitied himself. From a bystander's point of view, he pitied himself in the past. What kind of maturity was this? He was immersed in the familiar past until the waiter came in with a warm bowl of medicinal soup. Only then did he wake up. The waiter added hot medicinal soup into the large bathtub. With an ambiguous expression, he said with a smile, "Young master, who is that lady at the door to you? She has been waiting outside for a long time." Gu Beiyue immediately looked up, but did not say a word. The waiter thought that he had said something wrong and did not dare to ask again. He quickly avoided Gu Beiyue's gaze and continued to pour the medicinal soup. After a while, Gu Beiyue finally opened his mouth and said lightly, "She is my wife." The waiter's ambiguous tone made him have to admit it. Otherwise, how would a lady like Qin Min be thought of if she waited outside? "My eyes are bad. My eyes are bad." The waiter was very surprised and nodded repeatedly. However, he was puzzled. Since these two were husband and wife, why did they have to live in separate rooms? This young master lived in sky room number 2, while that madam lived in sky room number 1. Gu Beiyue saw the waiter's suspicious look and immediately thought of this. He explained, "We had a quarrel yesterday, so she's angry." The waiter laughed and was no longer curious. If it weren't for Gu Beiyue's intelligence and observation, and if it weren't for the waiter's talkative nature, Gu Beiyue wouldn't have to explain so much. When people who were too smart or too deep stayed with people who were too simple, it was destined that the smart ones would be more tired. What else did the waiter think Gu Beiyue would say? But after meeting Gu Beiyue, he didn't say anything. He waited for a while, then turned to leave. However, just as he was about to open the door, he turned back and whispered, "Young master, when you went out just now," Madam cried. Gu Beiyue, who had been silent, suddenly sat up. He frowned and asked seriously, "What happened?" The waiter thought that Madam was crying because of a quarrel, but seeing Gu Beiyue's reaction, he knew that something was wrong. He hurriedly explained, "I don't know either. After you went out, Madam just stood there without moving. She seemed to be bewitched. She didn't move away even after being hit twice." "Did you hit her?" Gu Beiyue anxiously interrupted. No, she just hit her shoulder. It's nothing serious." The waiter hurriedly explained. "Then why did she cry?" Gu Beiwei asked seriously. Based on his understanding of Qin Min, although Qin Min was born as the eldest daughter of the Qin family, she wasn't weak and wouldn't cry like this. I don't know either. I was afraid that she was hurt, so I went over to take a look and saw that Madam was crying. She said that she was hungry, so she ordered a table of dishes. After that, she went out. The waiter answered honestly. Gu Beiwei didn't ask any more questions after the waiter's words. His face was solemn as he silently waved his hand, indicating for the waiter to leave. Qin Min had been standing in the courtyard at the entrance. Seeing the waiter open the door and come out, she wasn't anxious. She waited patiently for the waiter to close the door and come down. Only then did she smile at the waiter and beckoned for him to come over. Compared to facing Gu Beiwei, the waiter was more afraid of Qin Min. He couldn't understand how this madam could smile at him so beautifully when she was crying just now. Yes, this madam's smile was much brighter than other people's laughter. The waiter walked over fearfully. Madam, what can I do for you? Is he asleep? Qin Min asked in a low voice. The waiter shook his head at first, but he quickly shook it again. What do you mean? Qin Min became serious. He was originally asleep, but I woke him up when I went in. But later he fell asleep again. The waiter could only explain it this way. He was afraid that if he said that the young master wasn't asleep, this madam would order him to do something. However, Qin Min didn't ask anything else, nor did she say anything else. She only wanted to know if he had truly relaxed and rested. She thought that as long as he could sleep, there shouldn't be a problem. Qin Min was happy and rewarded the waiter with an ingot of silver. This made the waiter extremely happy. Remember to come back later to change the medicinal soup. Don't delay too long, or you'll catch a cold easily. She instructed seriously. Yes, I'm guarding it. I'm also guarding Madam's medicine. Qin Min sensed that something was wrong after the waiter said that. She asked, "Who told you to call me Madam?" This young man had just called her a young lady, but after going in for a while, he had become Madam. Young master said so, the waiter answered. Qin Min's eyes lit up. She stood up and looked at the waiter thoughtfully. The waiter immediately realized that he seemed to have said something wrong again. He felt guilty. Madam, the medicine is still simmering on the stove. I'll go take a look. However, Qin Min walked in front of him. Her sweet smile was a little silly. She asked, "He just woke up?" I went in to change the medicinal soup and accidentally woke him up. The waiter could only confess honestly. Did he mention me? Qin Min asked again. The waiter couldn't take it anymore and could only tell the truth. Just now I was too talkative and said that you were waiting outside. Qin Min frowned. She didn't want Gu Beiwei to know about this. What did he say? Qin Min continued to ask. This way of getting to the bottom of things made the waiter unable to brush her off, so he told her the truth. Young master said that you were Madam. Qin Min looked at the tightly shut door and was a little stunned. Of course, she knew that he didn't want her to be the subject of ridicule. She sighed softly in her heart. Why do you have to be so tired? The waiter sneaked away, and Qin Min didn't pursue the matter. The waiter told Gu Beiwei that she was crying, but she didn't know about it. In the waiter's opinion, if her eyes were filled with tears and she was crying again, then she was crying. However, in her opinion, if the tears didn't fall out of her eyes, then she wasn't crying. Even if Gu Beiwei knew that she was at the door, she still guarded the door. She had to keep an eye on the waiter to see if he changed the water on time. Otherwise, if he caught a cold, then this hard-earned medicinal bath wouldn't be worth it. As she waited, she pondered over Gu Beiwei's prescription. Although she studied medicine, she was familiar with pharmacology. Unfortunately, she couldn't understand this prescription even after looking at it for a long time. The last time she took Gu Beiwei's pulse, she diagnosed that he had an illness that he had since he was young. It affected his lungs and exhausted his heart and kidneys. Based on this prescription, it was indeed a medicine that could cure his illness. However, she couldn't understand the use of several herbs. She hesitated for a long time and finally returned to her room. She secretly made a copy of the prescription and stayed there to slowly ponder over it. Actually, her first thought was to consult Mu Linger or Gu. However, after thinking about it seriously, she dispelled this thought. After all, this was Gu Beiyue's privacy. The only thing she could do was to urge him to take medicinal baths more often. After a while, the waiter brought over a bowl of black medicinal soup. Qin Min didn't want to drink it at first. She didn't really need this medicine. Moreover, most of the time she didn't like to drink medicine. She preferred acupuncture. The medicine was bitter, and she was afraid. She was about to throw the medicine away, but she seemed to have thought of something. She smiled to herself, as if she was entertaining herself, and drank the bitter medicine in big gulps. Elsewhere, the hot medicine drove away the cold of the night. Qin Min only felt her whole body warming up. She moved a chair over and placed it by Gu Beiyue's door. Holding a lantern, she stepped on it. The waiter happened to bring the hot medicinal soup over and was shocked when he saw this. Madam. Shoo! Qin Min stood on the high chair and looked back with a fierce look. If you wake him up, I'll ask you. The waiter walked closer and advised anxiously, Madam, what are you doing? If it falls, our small shop can't afford to pay for it. Qin Min ignored him. She tiptoed and hung the lantern on it. Then, she jumped down nimbly. The waiter looked at the hanging lantern and then looked at Qin Min. It was really unbelievable. He never thought that such a weak woman could actually do a man's work. Go in, the soup is going to get cold, Qin Min urged. The waiter didn't know what was wrong with him. He suddenly trembled and hurried in. Inside the room, Gu Beiyue's eyes were closed. It wasn't clear if he was really asleep or just pretending to sleep. The waiter didn't dare to say more. He changed the medicinal soup and hurried out. When he arrived at the door, he was shocked by Qin Min again. He saw Qin Min sitting by the door with her back against the wall and reading a medical book seriously. Her serious look made him not dare to disturb her. He couldn't bear to disturb her. After 3 o'clock, the waiter brought in clean hot water. Gu Beiyue's medicinal bath was over. Qin Min stretched lazily but didn't stay for long. She simply went back to her room without making a sound and fell asleep as soon as she laid down. The next day, she woke up very early again. However, after waiting for a long time, Gu Beiyue still didn't come out. She knocked a few times and asked softly, Grand Tutor Gu, are you awake? Gu Beiyue was already awake and was flipping through a few letters. He clearly heard Qin Min's voice, but he was indifferent. Qin Min knocked a few times but didn't get any response. She just thought that Gu Beiyue was still asleep. She didn't dare to disturb him. She would be happiest if he could rest for a while more. She went back to her room and continued to sleep. She originally thought that Gu Beiyue would wake her up when he woke up, but who knew that she would sleep in a daze until noon. When she woke up, Gu Beiyue had just packed up and left. When she saw him, she secretly heaved a sigh of relief and didn't say anything. Eldest Miss Qin, are you feeling better? Gu Beiyue asked. Much better. We can set off now, Qin Min said with a smile. The two of them only exchanged a few words before continuing their journey west. They didn't talk much along the way. They really didn't waste any more time and went straight to Medical City. Chapter 1306. Although Gu Beiyue kept his itinerary a secret and kept a low profile all the way. However, the Ren family and the Qin family still sent people to guard the entrance of the medical school day and night, waiting for Gu Beiyue's return. For the past month, the Qin family had sent Qin Min letters almost every day. Unfortunately, Qin Min never replied. Late one night, a carriage slowly stopped at the entrance of the medical school. Although the carriage was simple, the person driving it was like a banished immortal that could only be met by chance. Yes, Gu Beiyue had personally driven Qin Min back. They had chosen to arrive late at night to avoid the eyes of the crowd. Unfortunately, Gu Beiyue had sensed many people lurking around when he arrived. He got off the carriage first and took the wheelchair from the back of the horse. Then he got into the carriage and carried Qin Min. He whispered into the carriage, "There are people around. Be careful." Understood. Qin Min replied softly. Gu Beiwei reached out his hand. Miss Qin, sorry for the offense. Qin Min continued to smile. Thank you, Grand Tutor Gu. Thus, Gu Beiwei carried Qin Min. He supported her back with one hand and her legs with the other. It was a standard princess carry. Qin Min's hands were placed on both sides of her body. It would be a lie to say that she was not reserved. It would be a lie to say that she was not nervous. Her entire body was stiff. Other than herself, Gu Beiwei's feelings were the clearest. Her expression was nervous. She lowered her eyes and frowned slightly. He carried her out of the carriage and stepped on air. It was as if he was walking on air and landed lightly on the ground. He placed her in the wheelchair and inadvertently saw her expression. He immediately looked away. He did not know why, but the corners of his lips curled up into a faint smile. It was faint and faint. She did not know whether it was out of helplessness, mockery, or just pure amusement. Perhaps only he knew, or perhaps even he did not know. To Qin Min, even if Gu Beiwei's lips curled upwards by 3 or 4 degrees, she would not be able to tell. She was too nervous, being in his embrace, being supported by his hands, and being enveloped by the faint fragrance of herbs on his body. She could no longer care about anything else. Her eyes were empty, and her mind was completely blank. She closed her eyes subconsciously. Many times, when you like someone, the person is clearly in front of you, but you can't help but want to close your eyes and feel his existence. Perhaps it was because what was seen might not be remembered, but what was felt was the most eternal. Gu Beiwei placed Qin Min in the wheelchair and immediately got up. The first thing he did was to take off his cloak and cover Qin Min's legs. He said seriously, "Don't catch a cold and feel pain." Then he pushed Qin Min into the medical school. Before he even reached his residence, Vice Academy Head Shin came looking for him. "Lord Academy Head, you've finally returned. Is that patient still recuperating?" Gu Beiwei asked seriously. "Yes. It'll be the morning after tomorrow. If he isn't treated soon, he'll lose his life," Vice Academy Head Shin said anxiously. Gu Beiwei walked into the room as he asked, "What's the Qin family's intention now?" However, Vice Academy Head Shin still did not answer when they were already inside. Qin Min was a very careful and intelligent person. She knew that Vice Academy Head Shin was afraid of her presence. She hurriedly said, "Vice Academy Head Shin, the Qin family is in the wrong right now. My father is in the wrong. What's the situation now? Please speak frankly." Vice Academy Head Shin was not familiar with Qin Min, so he was rather surprised. It had to be said that when Gu Beiwei married Qin Min, everyone in the medical school, including him, felt that Gu Beiwei did not marry Qin Min sincerely. Instead, he had other motives. Vice Academy Head Shin was still somewhat hesitant. Gu Beiwei was about to speak when Qin Min suddenly stood up from the wheelchair and said indifferently, "Vice Academy Head Shin, you can rest assured now, right?" This Vice Academy Head Shin was frightened. He walked around Qin Min in a circle in disbelief, unable to believe his eyes. Qin Min sat down next to Gu Beiwei and gracefully gestured for him to sit. "Vice Academy Head Shin, let's sit down and talk in detail." Vice Academy Head Shin looked at Gu Beiwei and only sat down after Gu Beiwei nodded. "Esteemed Academy Head, what's going on?" When Gu Beiwei told him about Qin Min's legs being poisoned, Vice Academy Head Shin immediately realized that there was something fishy going on in the Qin family. Moreover, he had a suspect in his heart. Qin Min's father was the head of the Qin family, Qin Fengli. Qin Min was the eldest miss of the family and had several younger sisters. However, she only had one younger brother who had just turned 16 this year. Whether it was his medical skills or qualifications, he was only a third-rank doctor. The most talented person in the Qin family was the eldest miss of the family. Unfortunately, her legs were crippled and she couldn't find a good family to marry into. Thus, she couldn't increase her younger brother's strength in the competition for the patriarch's position through marriage. Therefore, the eldest miss of the family wasn't favored and didn't receive the cultivation she deserved. So much so that she had only participated in the examination once, and she was only a third-rank doctor. Qin Fingli knew that her younger sisters were only SOSO, so he didn't cultivate them. On the contrary, he found many good families for his daughters by marriage. In the eyes of the patriarch, no matter how good his daughter's medical skills were, she was still a woman. It was far from being comparable to the power of a family by marriage. The patriarch only had one son, so he spent all his efforts on him. However, his son was young and disappointing. Qin Fengli's younger brother, Qin Min's second uncle, and the second head of the Qin family, Qin Fengxian, had an extremely talented and promising son. He was 26 this year and was ranked as a fifth-rank divine doctor. It was very likely that he would break Han Kongan's record and become the youngest sixth-rank doctor in the history of the medical school. In the fight for the head of the family, medical skills were the most important, but it didn't represent everything. Other than helping his son fight for the head of the family, it wasn't impossible for Second Master Qin to harm Qin Min. Could even be said that he was the most suspicious. If it were any other family's internal strife, Vice Head Shin wouldn't pay so much attention to it. However, he wasn't the only one paying attention to the internal strife between the Qin and Ren families. Gu Beiwei had long been aware of it. After the former number 1 family, the Gu family, was defeated, the Qin and Ren families became the representatives of the medical school's 2 major powers. To a large extent, the medical school's decisions were controlled by the Qin and Ren families. Originally, the Ren family's medical skills and connections were superior. However, Gu Beiwei married Qin Min and became the Qin family's son-in-law, so the Qin family could contend with the Ren family. Of course, the Qin family's internal strife didn't have much to do with this matter, so it wasn't convenient for Vice Head Shin to ask about it. This time, it was a battle between the Qin and Ren families, so the eldest miss of the Qin family ought to side with her father. It was best for her to avoid arousing suspicion. Vice Head Shin glanced at the Vice Head Shin. Seeing that the vice head still didn't have any intention of speaking, he could only drop the matter. He thought that as long as the Vice Head Shin trusted Qin Min, he could also trust her. Vice Head Shin, Madam, Patriarch Qin still insists on not continuing the treatment. If he still doesn't change his mind the day after tomorrow, this patient will undoubtedly die. To be on the safe side, it's better for the Vice Head Shin to personally step in, Vice Head Shin said seriously. This time, the grievances between the Ren and Qin families were like this. Not long ago, there was an old man over 50 years old. His family was poor and had contracted a strange illness. He had been seeking treatment for a long time. Later, Patriarch Qin heard about this case and sent someone over to take the initiative to treat the old man. Patriarch Qin was a 7th-rank medical sage. Together with Patriarch Ren, they were known as the medical school's 3 sages, second only to divine Dr. Vice Head Shin and senior Dr. Gu Beiwei. It wasn't that easy to find Patriarch Qin to personally treat a patient. When Patriarch Qin received a case, he either examined the patient or treated the patient. Only those with authority and rare illnesses caught his eye. At first, the old man was very happy and deeply grateful to Patriarch Qin. However, who would have thought that after receiving treatment for a month, there would be no effect at all. Instead, his condition would worsen. Just as Patriarch Qin was about to proceed with the second stage of treatment, the old man suddenly ran away. He actually ran to the gate of the Ren family and knelt down, claiming that he had been cheated by Patriarch Qin and begging Patriarch Ren to save him. This matter thoroughly angered Patriarch Qin. Patriarch Ren didn't accept the old man's pleas. While refusing to treat him, he also persuaded the old man to return to the Qin family. However, Patriarch Qin said that no one in the Qin family was allowed to touch this case again, including himself. Patriarch Qin formulated a 3-month treatment plan for the old man. He used the method of putting him on the brink of death. First, all the lesions would be forced out, and then a thorough treatment would be carried out. This was an extremely risky treatment method. Now that the treatment was halfway through, once the doctor changed, the risk would be very high. Even if Patriarch Qin was willing to explain the previous treatment in detail to Patriarch Ren, Patriarch Run wouldn't dare to take over. Patriarch Run thus accused Patriarch Qin of depraved medical ethics, treating patients as ants and wantonly trampling on the patient's life. He even questioned Patriarch Qin's previous treatment plan. Patriarch Qin was so angry that he pushed the patient to Patriarch Run. He was even more determined not to accept the patient. No matter who persuaded him, he wouldn't give in. The Ren family and the Qin family were already turbulent in the dark. This time, when the two patriarchs quarreled, the two families openly opposed each other. This matter caused an uproar and upgraded the appearance of the two families. Large and small forces in the medical city also stood on the same side. Vice President Shin could pretend to be ignorant of the struggle between the two families and the two camps. However, this matter involved the patient's life. Since there was a patient between the two families, Vice President Shin had no choice but to intervene. His subordinates once proposed that the two families should fight. It would be best if the patient was exhausted to death. When the time came, the dean could use this as a reason to punish the two patriarchs and even revoke their medical qualifications. He could even take this opportunity to directly promote the reform of the medical school. He had to admit that this was an excellent idea. Any reform was inevitable without sacrifice. However, Vice President Shin was a doctor with a parental heart, so he couldn't be ruthless. He also knew very well that this young dean was even more unwilling to be ruthless. Therefore, he could only do his best to protect the patient and wait for the dean to return. Vice President Shin presented the case. If the patient had been handed to him from the beginning, he would have been able to cure him. In the current situation, he didn't dare to take the risk. He could only reluctantly protect the patient and prevent his condition from worsening. Gu Beiwei carefully read the case and asked indifferently, "This old man is from the Ren family, right?" Qin Min's lips curled into a faint smile. Vice President Shin was stunned at first, but he quickly came to a realization and fiercely slapped his forehead. He must be. I'm old and muddle-headed. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.